Hi guys, and welcome to Relaxing History Time. Tonight we slip quietly into a winter morning in Colonial America, the kind that does not rush you awake but nudges you with cold light and the promise of work. You are not jolted by an alarm. You drift up slowly aware first of stillness, then of the faint grey glow pressing through small window panes filmed with frost. The house feels paused as if it is holding its breath. And just to set expectations gently, you probably won't survive this morning without complaining at least once. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you are still awake enough, drop a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights and let yourself be here instead. You wake on a mattress that is nothing like the ones you know. It is lumpy, a little uneven, stuffed with straw or corn husks that rustle softly when you shift your weight. The sheets are coarse linen. They smell faintly of soap smoke and the long use of many winters. You do not fling them back. You hesitate. The cold beyond them is not theoretical. It is waiting. Your breath fogs as soon as your nose clears the covers. That alone tells you everything. In winter, colonial homes are unheated overnight. Fires are expensive in effort and fuel, and letting one burn while everyone sleeps is a risk few take lightly. A broadly accepted historical reality is that indoor temperatures often dropped close to outdoor levels by morning. The house is a wooden shell and winter has had all night to move in. You lie there listening. The silence is not empty. Wood ticks as it contracts. Somewhere in the walls you hear a soft pop like a knuckle cracking. Outside wind drags itself across bare branches. A distant animal shifts, maybe a cow or a pig, its breath audible in the quiet. The world feels narrowed, reduced to essentials. Light comes slowly. Colonial windows are small not just by design, but by necessity. Glass is costly, fragile, and often imperfect. Many panes ripple, slightly bending the pale dawn into uneven shapes. The frost along their edges looks almost decorative, feathery patterns that would be charming if you were not about to leave the bed. You pull the blanket tighter for one last moment. This is not laziness, it is strategy. Heat trapped is heat earned. When you finally sit up, the cold hits your chest first, then your arms, then your back. Your skin tightens instantly. You feel alert in a way coffee has never managed. There is no button to snooze. Morning has arrived because light has arrived. Time here is not counted in minutes yet. Clocks exist, yes, but historians still argue whether most households relied on them with any precision. Many families measure morning by habit, by the angle of light, by the sounds of others beginning to stir. You swing your legs over the side of the bed. The floorboards are bare wood worn smooth by generations of feet. They are icy. The shock travels straight up your leg, sharp enough to make you inhale quickly. You stand anyway. Standing is commitment. Once upright, you are part of the day. Clothes wait where you left them close enough to reach without crossing the room. That placement is not accidental. Shirt shifts, wool stockings, all laid out carefully the night before. The fabric is stiff with cold. Wool holds the smell of smoke from yesterday's fire. Linen feels dry and unyielding. You dress slowly, methodically, each layer adding weight and a faint sense of armour. A quirky detail that often surprises people is that many colonists slept in some of their daytime clothing during winter, not out of convenience but survival. Removing layers at night was a luxury reserved for warmer seasons or wealthier households. You do what keeps you alive, not what feels elegant. Your fingers fumble with ties and buttons. Dexterity takes time to return. You blow warm air into your hands, then rub them together. The sound feels loud in the quiet room. Somewhere else in the house another person shifts. A floorboard creaks. The day is spreading. You pause near the window. Outside the world is pale and rigid. Snow, if it has fallen, looks untouched, smooth as cloth pulled tight. If there is no snow, the ground is dark and hard, the earth sealed. The sky holds no colour yet, just a thin wash of grey. Weather matters more than mood today. It will decide how much you can accomplish. Some scholars continue to debate how emotionally accustomed people became to this daily discomfort. Was the cold simply accepted as normal, or did it remain a constant irritation endured but never fully embraced? Standing here now, you suspect the answer is both. Habit dulls shock, but it does not erase it. You open the bedroom door carefully. Hinges complain softly. The hallway is darker, colder. The smell changes. Less linen, more wood, more ash. You can tell the fire downstairs is dead. That knowledge presses gently at the back of your mind. Reviving it will be the first true task of the day. As you move, you become aware of how quiet your body is trying to be. Sound carries in winter. Cold air holds noise differently. A dropped object feels louder, more disruptive. You step with intention, listening for others, adjusting your pace to avoid collision in narrow spaces. This house, like most in colonial America, is compact. Rooms serve multiple purposes. Privacy is thin, warmth is shared. A commonly accepted fact is that architectural efficiency mattered more than comfort. Smaller spaces were easier to heat, easier to build, easier to maintain with limited tools. You reach the stairs or ladder leading down. The handrail is cold to the touch. You wrap your fingers around it anyway. Below you can already smell yesterday's fire in the hearth, faint but present. Ash and char and the promise of heat that is not yet real. For a moment you stop. There is a stillness here that modern mornings never offer. No engines, no screens, no artificial hum, just cold wood breath and the slow approach of work. The day is not shouting at you, it is waiting. You take the next step downward, carrying the quiet with you. You pause at the bottom of the stairs, and this is where the real test begins. Leaving the bed was one thing, leaving the bedroom was another. But now you are fully exposed to the heart of the house, where the cold has settled without apology. The air feels heavier here, denser, as if it resists movement. You draw your shoulders in slightly instinctively, trying to make yourself smaller. The floor beneath you is colder than upstairs. Heat rises, and everyone in colonial America knows this without needing to articulate it. Sleeping lofts and upper rooms exist partly because they trap what little warmth lingers overnight. Down here, the cold pools. It wraps around your ankles and creeps upward, patient and thorough. You take a breath through your nose and feel it sting. The air is dry, stripped of moisture by winter. Your throat tightens just a little. This is not illness. This is environment. A widely accepted historical fact is that respiratory discomfort was common in winter households, even among the healthy. Fires dried the air further once lit, but before that the cold alone did its work. You stand still for a moment, letting your body register the temperature. Moving too fast makes it worse somehow. There is a rhythm to this, a pacing learned early in life. Rush and you suffer. Move deliberately and you conserve energy. The hearth sits dark and hollow across the room. Its mouth is black with soot. Yesterday's ashes settled into a fine grey layer. You know what is inside without looking closely. A few embers may be hiding under ash, or maybe nothing at all. The uncertainty adds weight to the moment. If the fire does not wake easily, the morning becomes longer and colder. Before you deal with that, there is the matter of standing here fully awake now. Your muscles feel tight. Your hands ache slightly as if they have forgotten what warmth feels like. You flex your fingers slowly one at a time. The joints protest quietly. A quirky detail that often surprises people is how much colonists relied on posture and motion to stay warm indoors. Stomping was not considered rude in the morning. Shifting weights, swinging arms gently, even pacing in place were practical responses to cold, not nervous habits. You do a little of that now without thinking about it. Your clothing helps, but only just. Wool insulates even when damp, which is why it is everywhere in winter wardrobes. Linen layers trap air but do little on their own. You can feel the cold slipping through seams and cuffs. Scarves indoors are not fashion statements here. They are tools. You glance toward the door that leads outside its edges, rimmed with frost on particularly harsh mornings. You are not going there yet. That comes later. For now you remind yourself, conquer the inside first. Some historians still argue whether early rising in winter was as universal as popular imagery suggests. Diaries suggest variation. Some households delayed movement until light strengthened or fire returned. Others rose before dawn regardless, driven by chores and livestock needs. Standing here now, you understand that timing was less about discipline and more about necessity. You move toward the hearth. Each step produces a soft, hollow sound. Floorboards expand and contract with temperature, and winter mornings are when they complain the most. The noise feels amplified in the quiet house. Somewhere above you, someone shifts again. Maybe a child. Maybe another adult, gauging whether it is time to face the cold too. You kneel near the hearth, lowering yourself carefully. Knees on cold stone are a shock sharp enough to make you hiss quietly. You quickly adjust, sitting back on your heels instead. The stone smells faintly mineral mixed with ash and old smoke. It is a smell that means survival more than comfort. You brush aside ash, gently searching for heat with your eyes before your fingers dare to try. There, a dull red glow, barely alive. Relief settles in your chest. This morning is survivable. But even this small success does not erase the cold pressing against your back, your neck, your ears. You tug your collar higher. Your breath continues to show faint clouds rising and disappearing. Seeing it is oddly grounding. It reminds you that you are alive, that your body is producing heat even if it feels inadequate. A mainstream historical observation worth noting is that most colonial households accepted a daily cycle of cold and warmth, rather than trying to maintain steady temperatures. Consistency was a modern luxury. People adapted to fluctuation, instead learning when to endure and when to act. You stand again slowly, and the cold rushes back into spaces your body briefly warmed. It feels almost personal. You exhale long and steady. This is not something to fight emotionless. Resentment wastes energy. As you cross the room, you notice how little furniture there is. Fewer objects mean fewer cold surfaces, fewer obstacles to navigate in low light. Chairs sit close to walls. A table stands solid and simple. Everything here earns its place. You rub your arms through the fabric of your sleeves. The friction helps. So does movement. You walk a short loop around the room, not pacing anxiously, but warming deliberately. The house feels larger when you move through it like this, each step waking another part of it. Outside light strengthens slightly. The grey shifts toward pale blue. You notice it through the window without stopping to look directly. Morning is advancing whether you are ready or not. There is a brief moment standing there when you imagine staying still until someone else lights the fire, until the room warms without your effort. It passes quickly, or that is not how mornings work here. Waiting only makes things harder. You turn back toward the hearth, ready to begin coaxing heat from yesterday's remains. Your fingers are steadier now. The initial shock has faded into a manageable ache. This is how adjustment feels. Not comfort, but tolerance. And with that small shift, you realize the hardest part is already over. You are up. You are standing. The day has claimed you. Your breath keeps betraying you. Every exhale blooms into the cold air like a small ghost and then vanishes. You cannot help watching it for a moment. It is proof of effort, proof of life, proof that your body is working even when the house seems determined to drain every bit of warmth from you. In winter, breath becomes a visible companion. Children learn this early. Adults stop commenting on it. It simply is. A well-established historical reality is that indoor temperatures in colonial homes often hovered just above freezing in the early morning hours. This is not a dramatic exaggeration. It is a baseline condition. You feel it now in the tightness of your chest and the way your nostrils sting slightly with each inhale. You breathe more slowly, instinctively adjusting. Fast breaths feel wasteful. Slow ones warm the air just a little before it reaches your lungs. You learn this without being taught. The body adapts faster than the mind. The house exhales too. You hear it in small ways. A beam shifts overhead with a soft groan. The doorframe clicks as wood contracts. These sounds are not alarming. They are familiar, almost reassuring. Silence here is layered, textured. It is never empty. You stand near the hearth again, waiting before you begin the careful work of rebuilding the fire. Rushing this part leads to smoke, frustration, wasted tinder. You watch the faint red ember pulse weakly under ash. Your breath drifts toward it, and for a second the glow brightens as if encouraged. You smile at that barely. A quirky detail that sometimes appears in letters from the period is how people described warming their breath intentionally over embers, not just to stoke the fire, but to warm their faces. It sounds absurd until you're here doing exactly that. Palms, open fingers spread, feeling the faintest hint of heat lick the skin. You rub your hands together again. The sound is dry, whispery. Friction helps, but it is temporary. True warmth requires fire movement or time, preferably all three. You glance toward the window. Frost still clings stubbornly to the glass, but light is stronger now. Shapes outside sharpen slightly. A fence line, the dark suggestion of trees. The sky remains pale, undecided. Weather will declare itself soon enough. As you move, you become acutely aware of how your breath sounds in your own ears. In modern life, breathing is background noise. Here it feels louder, more present. Each inhale has weight. Each exhale fogs, curls, disappears. It slows you down in a way that feels almost meditative. Some scholars continue to debate how much people consciously notice this daily discomfort versus how much it faded into normalcy. Did winter breathing feel remarkable, or did it simply become another unnoticed rhythm like walking or blinking? Standing here now, watching your breath cloud the room, you suspect awareness of how it came and went. On harder days it demanded attention, on routine ones it receded. You kneel again at the hearth, this time prepared. You clear ash, gently exposing more of the ember. The movement sends a fine grey dust into the air. It smells dry mineral, faintly bitter. You suppress a cough. Cold air and ash do not cooperate kindly with lungs. You added a twist of dry kindling, then another, careful not to smother what little heat remains. Your breath continues to drift upward, mingling with faint smoke that begins to curl lazily toward the chimney. For a moment the two are indistinguishable. Breath and smoke look the same here. Both vanish into the same space. That thought lingers. In winter mornings like this, the line between body and house feels thinner. Your warmth matters to the room. The room's cold matters to you. Survival is not individual, it is shared. You sit back on your heels and wait. Waiting is part of the skill. Fidgeting wastes heat. Impatience ruins it. You keep your hands close. Palms angle toward the ember, absorbing what little warmth it gives. Your fingers tingle, first painfully, then with relief as circulation returns. A commonly accepted historical observation is that mornings dictated the pace of the entire day. How quickly the fire caught determined how soon food could be prepared, water-heated tasks begun. There was no backup plan, no alternate heat source humming quietly in the background. As the flame finally takes small at first, then steadier, you feel a subtle shift in the room. It is not warm yet. That will take time, but the presence of fire changes everything psychologically. Cold with hope feels different than cold alone. Your breath changes too. It no longer fogs quite as thickly near the hearth. The air there is marginally warmer, and your body notices immediately. You angle yourself closer, knees still cold, back still chilled, but hands finally beginning to thaw. You stand once more, carefully this time, aware of how easily dizziness can creep in when you move too fast in cold. You stretch your arms overhead slowly, joints cracking softly. The sound echoes faintly in the room. You roll your shoulders, encouraging blood to move. Elsewhere in the house, movement answers yours. Footsteps overhead. A muffled yawn. Someone else is waking, drawn by the promise of warmth or the sound of your activity. Morning spreads through the house, not all at once, but in waves. You walk toward the table, resting your hands briefly on its surface. The wood is cold but solid. This house has weathered many winters. It'll weather this one too. The thought is comforting. Outside, a bird calls sharp and brief. The sound slices through the quiet and then disappears. Winter birds waste no energy on unnecessary noise. You admire that. You return to the hearth once more, adjusting a log, watching flame strengthen. Your breath is still visible if you look for it, but you're no longer fixated on it. That is adjustment, not comfort, but progress. Soon the house will smell more strongly of smoke and warming wood. Soon the room will be less hostile. But for now you stand between night and day, between cold endured and warmth earned, breathing steadily present in a moment most modern mornings have forgotten. The house is no longer completely asleep. It is not awake either. It exists in that in-between state where sounds carry softly and movement happens with intention. You notice this as you stand near the hearth listening, more than doing for a moment. Winter mornings sharpen your hearing. When sight is limited and warmth scarce, sound becomes a guide. A beam overhead gives a slow, tired creak. Not a complaint, just an acknowledgement of the cold. Wood reacts to winter the way skin does, tightening, shifting, settling into a new shape until warmth returns. You hear it in the walls, in the floor, in the furniture. The house speaks quietly all morning long. Outside wind drifts past the structure rather than striking it directly. You can tell by the sound. When it hits head on, it howls. When it slides along the sides, it sighs. This morning it sighs. That tells you something useful. It might be cold, but it's not storming. Plans can proceed, at least for now. You move a little closer to the hearth, not enough to crowd it, just enough to stay within its faint influence. The fire is growing, but slowly. It has its own pace, and you respect that. Smoke lifts upward, thinner, now finding the chimney without resistance. The smell settles into the room, not unpleasant, just present. Smoke is not a warning here. It is reassurance. Some period accounts suggest that people learn to read the health of a fire by smell alone. Too sharp meant green wood. Too thick meant poor airflow. You notice these things without naming them. Experience does the work quietly. You become aware of other sounds now. A soft thud from upstairs as someone swings their legs out of bed. A low murmur, barely a voice yet. Perhaps a child negotiating with the cold, perhaps an adult reminding themselves to move. You do not call out. There is no need. Sound carries. Presence announces itself naturally. A small animal shifts somewhere nearby, maybe beneath the floor or just outside the wall. Mice are constant companions in winter, drawn by warmth and stored food. This is not alarming. It is expected. Traps exist. Yes, but complete exclusion is unrealistic. You coexist out of necessity. One lesser discussed detail is how accustomed people became to these shared spaces, human and animal alike. Absolute separation is a modern preference. Here boundaries blur. Warmth matters more than comfort. You walk slowly across the room, letting the fire work while you do something else useful. Movement keeps blood circulating. You stretch your fingers again, then your wrists rotating them gently. The joints feel stiff but responsive. This stiffness will fade as the day progresses. For now it is simply part of waking. You pause near the door leading outside, placing a hand against the wood. It is cold through your sleeve. The door feels solid thick, designed to keep winter out but never fully succeeding. You imagine the air on the other side sharper, cleaner, less forgiving. You're not ready for that yet. Instead, you turn towards the table. A few objects sit there arranged neatly. Nothing decorative. Everything practical. A knife, a bowl, maybe a loaf wrapped in cloth. Order matters in the morning. It saves time and energy later. It's widely understood that colonial households favoured routines that minimised unnecessary motion, especially in winter. Efficiency was not a buzzword. It was survival logic. Every step wasted warmth. Every delay cost daylight. You listen again. The house sounds fuller now. Footsteps above move with more confidence. A cough, a soft laugh, brief and quiet, as if laughter itself has not fully warmed up yet. These sounds relax you. Morning is communal. You're not facing it alone. Some researchers continue to question how emotionally isolating winter mornings truly were. While the cold was harsh, the shared rhythm of waking may have provided a sense of connection that offset discomfort. Listening to these small sounds, now you lean toward that interpretation. The fire pops gently, startling you despite yourself. A small spark jumps, then settles. You adjust a log, slightly careful not to disrupt airflow. Your hands are warmer now, not comfortable but usable. That is progress. You notice your breath again, but differently. It no longer clouds as dramatically near the hearth. Farther from it, the fog returns. The room has gradients now, cold corners, warmer center. You learn to navigate these invisible zones instinctively. A curious habit recorded in some households involves standing with one foot closer to the fire and one farther away, rotating periodically to distribute warmth evenly. You catch yourself doing exactly that without thinking about it, shifting weight, turning slightly, managing exposure. You lean briefly against the wall, letting your back warm. The sensation is subtle but satisfying. Heat seeps through fabric slowly. You close your eyes for a second, not to rest, just to register the change. Outside, another sound cuts through the quiet. Metal against wood. A distant gate. Perhaps a neighbour beginning their own morning. The distance between households means you do not hear voices clearly, just hints of activity. Still, it reminds you that this morning is happening everywhere, not just here. There is no clock announcing the hour. Time moves by cues instead. Light strengthens and strengthens. Fire steadies. People stir. This is enough. You step back towards the hearth once more, crouching to adjust the kindling. The flame responds eagerly now. Heat pushes outward in gentle waves. You hold your hands closer, palms open, absorbing it. The ache in your fingers fades into warmth that almost feels luxurious. For a brief moment, the house feels cooperative. Not warm, not easy, but no longer hostile. You sense the shift and appreciate it. Winter mornings teach gratitude in small increments. Upstairs, footsteps begin descending. Someone joins you at the edge of the room, not speaking yet, just sharing space. You feel their presence more than you hear it. Together you face the day as it arrives slowly, deliberately, one sound at a time. Clothing waits for you the way tools do not, as an expression of taste but as a line of defense. You notice it more clearly now as the house grows marginally brighter and the fire begins to hold its shape. Shirts, stockings, skirts, breeches, shawls, all placed where cold hands can find them without searching. Nothing here is accidental. Winter punishes forgetfulness. You reach for the next layer and feel how stiff it is. Wool does this in cold air. It holds its form, resists bending, remembers the night. When you pull it on, it scratches lightly at your skin, not painfully, just enough to remind you it is there. Comfort is secondary, function comes first. People today often imagine colonial clothing as quaint or charming, but everyday garments were workwear in the most literal sense. Period records indicate that most households owned only a small rotation of winter clothing repaired repeatedly rather than replaced. You feel that history in the seams and the way fabric has softened unevenly over time. You tug a stocking higher on your calf fingers, fumbling briefly before finding the rhythm. The fabric is cold enough to make you inhale sharply when it touches bare skin. That reaction fades quickly. Your body learns the sequence. Cold tension, acceptance. There's a faint smell to the clothes. Smoke, yes, but also wool itself, lanolin lingering despite washing. It is an earthy scent, animal and fire and long use. Cleanliness here does not mean absence of smell, it means familiarity. Some historians remain divided on how often winter clothing was washed. Water freezes. Soap costs effort. Drying takes time and heat. Evidence from household accounts suggests garments were aired frequently and washed sparingly during colder months. You understand why. The clothes feel worn but not dirty, lived in rather than neglected. You adjust a shawl around your shoulders, letting it fall in a way that traps warmth at the back of your neck. That spot seems especially vulnerable. Cold finds it easily. You tuck the fabric closer and feel immediate relief, slight but noticeable. The act of dressing takes longer than it does in your world. Buttons are small, ties require coordination, layers must align, there is no rushing without consequence. A sleeve twisted wrong will chafe all day. A stocking folded poorly will rub until skin protests. You slow down knowing this. A lesser-known habit involved laying clothing near the hearth overnight if embers allowed not to dry them but to take the edge off the cold. It was a small mercy when possible. Today that did not happen either, from caution or lack of fuel. You accept it without comment. As you dress, the room changes subtly. The fire has settled into a steady burn now, not roaring but reliable. Light flickers across walls, bringing texture forward. You notice tool marks in wood-shallow grooves where hands worked long ago. So the house carries memory in these details. Someone else crosses the room behind you. You sense them rather than hear them, a shift in air, a presence. They move with the same careful economy, no wasted steps. Morning etiquette is quiet by default. Words can wait. You finish tying the last fastening and flex your arms. The weight of the clothing is comforting. Heavier than modern garments, it presses warmth inward, limits heat loss. You feel more contained, more prepared. It is generally recognized that winter dress varied by region and class, but layering was universal. The concept of one garment providing warmth was unrealistic. Heat came from accumulation, layer upon layer, fabric trapping, air body heat trapped in turn. You take a few steps around the room, testing mobility. The clothes restrict slightly, but you are used to it. Everyone is. Ease of movement matters, but so does endurance. These garments are designed to last hours of work, not minutes of comfort. You rub your hands together and then tuck them briefly beneath the shawl, pressing them against your torso. The warmth there surprises you. It is built slowly without your noticing. This is how winter mornings reward patience. A quiet exchange happens nearby. A few words murmured too low to make out fully, likely a simple acknowledgement of the cold or a comment about the fire. Conversation in winter often stays practical. Commentary wastes breath. Some scholars suggest that these shared dressing rituals reinforced household bonds, especially in winter when people spent more time indoors together. Clothing was personal, but warmth was communal. The house functioned as a single system, everyone contributing to its balance. You glance toward the stairs again. More movement now. A child perhaps stepping cautiously, learning the morning by imitation. You remember how early this education begins. Cold does not wait for adulthood. You adjust the shawl once more, then secure a cap or bonnet over your hair. Heat escapes from the head quickly. This is not superstition. Experience has taught it repeatedly. The fabric presses gently against your ears, dulling sound, slightly softening the world. The fire cracks again, louder this time. Someone adds another piece of wood. The scent deepens. Warmth expands outward in slow pulses. The room is not warm yet, but it is changing. You feel ready now to move on to the next tasks. Dressing has marked the transition from night to day more clearly than any clock could. You are no longer half awake. You are equipped. As you take one last look around the room, you notice how everyone's clothing differs slightly. Mended elbows, replaced buttons, patched hems. These small variations tell stories of work done seasoned, survived, resources managed carefully. Nothing here is wasteful. You draw a steady breath. It no longer fogs as dramatically near the fire. Your body has found its rhythm. The morning is no longer a shock, it is a process unfolding step by step. Fully dressed, you turn toward the next necessity, knowing the hardest adjustments are behind you. Cold still exists, but you are no longer meeting it unprepared. You move forward layered and steady into the rest of the morning. Your feet remind you of themselves the moment you take your first step without thinking. Even wrapped in stockings, the cold pushes through the floorboards with surprising clarity. It is not a single sensation, but many. A sharp chill at the heel, a dull ache along the arch, a creeping numbness at the toes. You pause, shifting your weight, letting blood catch up. Floors in colonial homes were rarely insulated the way modern ones are. That fact is well documented in building records and surviving structures. Wood planks were laid directly over joists, sometimes above bare earth. In winter, the ground's cold travelled upward without much resistance. You are feeling geology now, not just weather. You take another step, then another, moving slowly at first. Walking warms you better than standing still. You make a small circuit of the room, careful not to stray too far from the hearth's influence. Each pass brings a slight improvement. The pain softens into awareness. Awareness turns into tolerance. A curious habit noted in some households involve keeping a small pile of ashes near frequently used paths on the floor, not for cleanliness but insulation. Ash holds heat longer than bare wood. Whether this was widespread or occasional remains unclear, but the idea makes sense when your feet ache like this. You glance down and notice the grain of the floorboards more clearly in the growing light. They are worn smooth in some places, rougher in others. Knots interrupt the pattern unpredictably. You learn where to step by memory. Certain boards feel colder than others. Those likely sit above gaps or thinner earth below. Someone passes you moving toward the hearth, and you feel a brief swirl of warmer air as they go by. Even that is noticeable. Bodies are heat sources. Proximity matters. You stop near the table and lift one foot, resting it briefly on the lower rung of a chair. Balancing, you rub warmth into your ankle through the fabric. Then you switch sides. This is not a stretch, it is maintenance. Some historians question how often footwear was worn indoors during winter mornings. Shoes track in snow and mud, but bare feet or thin stockings risk frost discomfort. The compromise in many homes seems to have been delayed. Footwear worn once movement increased or tasks demanded it. You are living that compromise now. You test the floor closer to the hearth. It is marginally warmer there, though still far from comfortable. Heat spreads unevenly following drafts and airflow rather than logic. You learn these patterns over years, then stop thinking about them. You bend slightly at the knees and roll your feet from heel to toe a few times, encouraging circulation. The motion feels good. Pain recedes. You straighten again, continue moving. Outside light brightens further. Shadows sharpen. The day is officially underway whether your toes agree or not. You head toward the corner where footwear is kept. Boots and shoes rest their thick leather stiff from cold. You pick one up and feel its weight. Solid, reassuring, but unyielding. Putting them on too soon can be uncomfortable. Cold leather resists shaping. You set them back down for now. A small detail that surfaces in letters from the period is how often people complained about cold feet specifically. Not hands, not faces, but feet. Standing on frozen ground for hours made them a weak point. You sympathize deeply. You walk again faster this time. The room allows it now. Your feet have adjusted enough to tolerate contact. Each step feels less like punishment and more like motion. This is the turning point. Once your feet cooperate, the rest of the body follows. You stop near the window and shift your weight from side to side, watching frost retreat slightly from the glass where warmth reaches it. The pattern changes, slowly melting into droplets that cling before sliding downward. Even glass participates in the morning's transformation. Someone sets a pot near the fire. The metal rings softly when it touches stone. That sound adds to the morning's texture. Soon there will be water heating. Soon there will be steam. That will help the air, your skin, your lungs. You feel steadier now. The initial shock of cold floor has faded into a manageable sensation, something you can ignore if necessary. This is adaptation in real time. Not heroic, not dramatic, just functional. There is a quiet satisfaction in that. Your body has learned what it needs to do without instruction. Stand, move, wait, pulse it, adjust. You reach down and pick up one boot again, testing it. It is still cold, but your hands can manage it now. You decide to wait just a bit longer. Let the fire do more work first. There is no prize for rushing. As you set the boot back, you notice the subtle warmth creeping upward from the floor near the hearth. Not much, but enough to matter. Heat changes everything gradually. Winter mornings reward patience in small increments. You take one more circuit of the room, feet landing with confidence now rather than caution. The house feels slightly less hostile. The floor once shocking has become familiar. This is how winter teaches endurance. Not by removing discomfort, but by making it predictable. You learn where the cold will strike and how long it will last. Knowledge becomes insulation of its own. When you finally pause again, standing still no longer feels like punishment. Your feet are awake, your legs are steady, you're ready to move on. The morning continues, one sensation yielding to the next as the house and everyone inside it slowly reach working temperature together. You return to the hearth with a different posture now. Earlier you approached it cautiously, almost defensively. Now you come with purpose. Fire is no longer a question mark, it is a responsibility. How well you manage it will shape everything that follows. You crouch again closer this time, feeling the difference immediately. The stone nearest the flame has lost its bite. It is still cool but no longer hostile. You rest your palms near it, not touching, just close enough to absorb what it gives. Heat radiates, unevenly pulsing outward in soft waves. You learn to read those waves with your skin. The fire itself has matured. What began as a fragile flicker now holds steady, fed by thin kindling and patience. You watch the way the flame curls, the colour shifting from pale yellow to deeper orange as it strengthens. This is not something you rush. Fires have moods. You meet them where they are. Surviving household manuals from the period make it clear that keeping a fire alive was considered a skill, not a chore. It required judgment. Too much fuel too soon smothered it. Too little let it die. You feel that balance instinctively now, guided by experience rather than instruction. You select a thicker piece of wood and slide it in carefully. The fire responds with a soft crack, not angry, just alert. A brief flare of light fills the hearth, then settles. Smoke lifts smoothly toward the chimney. That is a good sign. You nod to yourself, a small private acknowledgement of competence. A lesser-known domestic habit involved banking fires overnight with ash to preserve embers. It did not always work. Wind shifts, damp wood, or simple misjudgment could undo the effort. Mornings like this, when embers survive, feel like small victories. You accept the gift without celebrating it too loudly. You straighten slowly, mindful of your knees, and step back to assess the room. The change is subtle but undeniable. Shadows soften. Air near the hearth feels less sharp. The house is beginning to cooperate. Someone brings more wood from the stack inside, setting it down within reach. The pieces knock together with a dull sound. Dry wood rings differently than damp. You notice the difference immediately. This wood will burn well. Relief follows. Fuel quality matters more in winter than almost anything else. There is still discussion among historians about how much time colonial households spent managing fires each day. Estimates vary widely. Some suggest hours of cumulative attention. Others argue for shorter, more frequent checks. Watching the fire now, you suspect the truth depended on the day, the weather, and the household's experience. Fire demanded respect, but not constant hovering. You move a chair closer, angling it just enough to catch warmth without blocking airflow. Furniture placement around the hearth is deliberate. Everyone knows where to sit. These positions are learned over years, passed down without comment. The warm spots belong to those who need them most at the moment. You sit briefly, letting heat reach your legs. The fabric of your clothing absorbs warmth and holds it, pressing it back against your skin. The sensation is deeply satisfying, not dramatic, just relieving. You exhale slowly, feeling tension ease from your shoulders. Nearby, someone sets a kettle or pot on a hook or trivet near the fire. Metal warms quickly. It clicks faintly as it expands. That sound signals progress. Soon there will be hot water, not for luxury but for necessity. Warm water changes everything. Accounts from the time suggest that mornings often revolved around the fire, until it reached a reliable state. Food preparation waited, washing waited, conversation waited. Fire came first. You feel the logic of that priority clearly now. You stand again, reluctant but ready. Sitting too long cools you. Movement remains important. You step aside as another person approaches the hearth, hands outstretched, absorbing heat in turn. There is no competition here. Warmth is shared, rotated, distributed as needed. A small but telling practice involved turning children toward the fire one side at a time, warming cheeks and hands alternately to avoid burns. You watch this happen now quietly, efficiently. No fuss, just care. You notice how the fire changes the sound of the room. Crackling replaces silence. Smoke softened sharp edges. Even footsteps sound different when warmth returns. The house feels inhabited again rather than merely occupied. You glance toward the window. Frost has retreated further. Droplets cling to the glass, catching light. Outside, the sky has committed to a pale blue. The day is no longer tentative. Some modern interpretations emphasize the hardship of these mornings, and rightly so, but there is another layer that emerges when you stand here. Mastery, routine, the quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly what to do and when to do it. Winter strips life down, but it also clarifies it. You add another piece of wood slightly thicker than the last. The fire accepts it eagerly. Flames rise, then settle into a steady rhythm. This is the point you've been working toward. Not roaring heat, but reliability. You step back and rub your hands together once more, not out of desperation now, but habit. They're warm enough, your fingers move easily. The earlier stiffness is gone. Around you the household adjusts. People claim tasks. Someone moves toward the water source, someone else prepares food. The morning unfolds naturally now that the fire anchors it. You take one last look at the hearth, committing its state to memory. You will check it often, but you do not need to watch it constantly. Trust has been established. As you turn away, you feel a quiet sense of readiness. The house is awake. Warmth is growing. The worst of the morning has passed. From here on, everything builds outward from this point of heat, one task at a time as winter loosens its grip just enough to let the day continue. Warmth announces itself by smell before it does by touch. You notice it as the fire settles into a steady burn and the room fills with the scent of heating wood. It is dry, slightly sweet, with an edge of smoke that clings to fabric and hair. This smell will follow you through the day. It always does. Winter carries it everywhere. The smoke lifts lazily at burst, then more decisively as the draft strengthens. It traces the air currents you cannot see curling toward the chimney in pale ribbons. You watch it for a moment, gauging. If it lingers too low, something is wrong. If it moves too fast, heat is being pulled away. Today it behaves well. The house breathes again. People in this period learn to read smoke the way sailors read wind. Surviving descriptions make it clear that smoke was information, not inconvenience. It told you about airflow, fuel quality, weather pressure. You absorb that knowledge now without formal thought responding to what you see. The room warms unevenly. Near the hearth, the air grows almost comfortable. A few steps away, winter still holds firm. You learn to position yourself between these zones, moving when necessary, lingering when possible. The morning becomes a quiet dance of proximity and patience. Someone lifts the pot and shifts it closer to the flame. The metal rings softly as it settles. A faint hiss follows as frost melts from its surface. Water will take time to heat, but even this early stage matters. Steam will come later, easing the dryness in the air and on your skin. You notice how your breathing changes as the room warms. The tightness in your chest loosens. Inhales feel less sharp, exhales no longer sting. It is a subtle shift, but meaningful. Cold affects lungs as much as limbs. Relief arrives quietly. One often overlooked detail is how winter air indoors could become harsh even without extreme cold. Fires dried the environment quickly. People countered this by keeping water near the hearth, not just for cooking, but for the air itself. The practice was practical long before it was understood scientifically. You reach out and warm your hands again, turning them slowly, palms and backs alternating. The heat feels deeper now, penetrating fabric and skin rather than skimming the surface. Blood moves more freely. Fingers regain their fine control. You flex them, pleased. The house sounds different with warmth, present. Crackling replaces creaking. Movement becomes less cautious. Someone clears their throat nearby louder than before, as if testing their voice. A brief exchange of words follows, ordinary and unremarkable, yet grounding. Speech returns when breath feels reliable. There remains some disagreement among scholars about how smoky these interiors truly were on a daily basis. Paintings often exaggerate haze for atmosphere. Archaeological evidence from soot patterns suggests variation. Watching the clean rise of smoke, now you suspect skilled management kept air clearer than popular imagination assumes, at least on good days. You step away from the hearth, briefly curious how far warmth has travelled. Near the table, the air still bites, but less than before. You hold your hands there and feel the difference. The gradient has shifted. That alone feels like progress. Outside light strengthens further. The sky has chosen its tone, pale blue with a hint of white, cold but stable. You take this in through the window, interpreting it instinctively. No sudden storm, no immediate threat. Plans can hold. Someone opens a small vent or adjusts a shutter slightly. The change in airflow is immediate. Smoke lifts faster. The fire responds with a brighter flame. Managing air is as important as managing fuel. The house is a system. Every adjustment affects the whole. A small domestic habit that rarely makes it into history books involved rotating seating near the fire to prevent any one person from overheating or getting too cold. Warmth was shared consciously. You see this happen now almost without words. One person stands, another takes their place. Balance maintained. You sit for a moment longer, and before letting heat soak into your legs. The weight of your clothing traps it effectively now. Wool does its job well when given the chance. The earlier stiffness in your joints fades into something closer to comfort. You notice the smell of your clothes change slightly as they warm. Smoke deepens. Wool releases its own scent. It is not unpleasant. It is familiar. Winter mornings imprint themselves this way. Smell becomes memory. Some interpretations suggest that the sensory intensity of these mornings made them more memorable than modern routines. Without artificial warmth or noise, every change stood out. Sitting here now, you understand that. Each small shift registers clearly. Nothing is background. You stand again, knowing that staying still too long will undo progress. Warmth gain can be lost easily. You move with purpose, but not urgency. There is time now measured not by clocks, but by readiness. The pot near the fire begins to whisper softly, not boiling yet just warming. That sound signals the next phase of the morning. Washing, mulching, cooking. Comfort in limited forms becomes possible. You glance at others in the room. Faces look less tense, movements smoother. Even the children seem less hesitant, drawn closer to the hearth's influence. Winter disciplines everyone equally at first, then eases its grip unevenly. A brief plume of steam rises as someone lifts the pot slightly. Moisture enters the air. Your skin notices immediately. Lips feel less tight, eyes less dry. Relief arrives in increments. You return to the hearth once more, making a final adjustment to the logs. The fire responds predictably now. You have found its rhythm. Trust settles in. The house feels awake in a way it did not before. Not lively, not loud, but functional, capable. The morning has crossed an invisible threshold. What began as endurance is becoming routine. You take a steady breath. It no longer fogs near the fire. The cold has retreated, not defeated, but negotiated with. This is as good as winter mornings get. From here, the day can proceed. Tasks will follow one after another, grounded in this pocket of warmth you have carefully built and maintained. Cold water waits for you with a kind of honesty that fire never offers. It does not tease or negotiate, it simply is. As the pot warms near the hearth, you prepare for what comes next, knowing there will be no easing into it. Washing in winter is not refreshing, it is bracing in the most literal sense. You lift the basin carefully and set it closer to the fire, not to warm the water too much, but to keep it from stealing what little heat you have gained. Steam rises faintly now, barely visible, more a suggestion than a promise. You dip your fingers in briefly testing, still cold, still sharp. You withdraw them quickly and rub them together, smiling faintly at your own hesitation. Daily washing was expected even in winter, though expectations varied by household and circumstance. Letters and journals indicate that faces and hands were cleaned routinely, while full bathing was rare during colder months. You understand the logic immediately. Exposure carries risk. Balance matters. You splash a little water onto your hands. The shock makes you inhale sharply. Skin tightens. Fingers redden almost instantly. You move quickly now, efficiency overriding discomfort. Rub, rinse, dry. The process is swift, practiced, economical. Lingering would be foolish. A small but telling habit involved keeping cloths near the fire, so they would be less punishing when used. Even so, the fabric feels cold when it touches your skin. You press it to your hands and cheeks, blotting rather than rubbing. Abrasion would only make the cold linger longer. You bend slightly and splash water onto your face. The sensation is startling every time, no matter how many winters you have lived through. Eyes close instinctively. For a moment the world narrows to cold and breath. Then it passes. You straighten, blinking skin tingling. Some researchers continue to discuss how winter hygiene standards balanced health and comfort. Too little washing risked illness. Too much exposure risked chill. The middle path appears to have been the norm, guided by experience rather than theory. Standing here now, you follow that path without thinking about it. You dry your face thoroughly, especially around the nose and ears. Those areas suffer first. You tuck the cloth back near the hearth so it will be usable again later. Nothing here is used once and forgotten. Everything cycles. The smell of warm water mixes with smoke briefly. It is a clean smell, fleeting but noticeable. You breathe it in and feel steadier, more awake. Washing does that. It marks the transition from sleep to work more clearly than any spoken greeting. Nearby someone tends to a child, guiding small hands through the same ritual. There is no complaint, just concentration. Children learn early that winter mornings demand cooperation. Complaining wastes warmth. You notice how quickly moisture leaves the skin in this air. Dryness returns almost immediately. Lips tighten. Knuckles feel rough. Some households kept small amounts of animal fat or oil for this purpose rubbed into the skin to prevent cracking. You reach for it now, warming it between your fingers before applying it sparingly. Relief follows, quiet and practical. A detail sometimes overlooked is how sensory memory builds around these routines. The smell of soap, the sting of water, the warmth of cloth. These become anchors. Years later, a similar scent or sensation can pull a person back into a specific morning. You feel that weight of repetition now comforting in its familiarity. You rinse the basin lightly and set it aside, careful not to spill. Water is valuable in winter. Fetching more takes effort. Waste is not an option. As you turn back toward the hearth, you notice how the room feels different, now that skin is clean and warmed. Clothing settles better. Movements feel smoother. The morning has another layer of readiness to it. Someone pours a small amount of warmed water into a cup and hands it to another. They sip slowly, steam brushing their face. Even without tea or coffee, warmth alone comforts. The act matters more than the contents. There is still debate among historians about how widespread morning washing rituals were across regions and dines and social classes. Evidence suggests variation. Frontier households adapted differently than town dwellers. Climate mattered. Access mattered. What remains consistent is the presence of some form of cleansing, however minimal. You participate in that continuity now. You stretch your hands toward the fire once more, letting them dry fully. The earlier sting has faded into warmth. Skin feels alive rather than assaulted. You flex your fingers and feel control return completely. Outside sunlight finally reaches the lower edge of the window. It catches on melting frost, turning droplets into tiny mirrors. You watch them slide down slowly one by one, leaving clear trails behind. Even glass sheds winter eventually. You hear the faint scrape of a spoon against a bowl nearby. Someone is preparing the first simple meal of the day. The sound is soft but unmistakable. Hunger will follow soon. Washing sharpens appetite. You rub your face once more with a cloth, satisfied, then hang it carefully to dry where heat can reach it. Everything returns to its place. Order helps the morning move forward. Your body feels fully awake now. Not energetic, not eager, but present. Cold still exists at the edges, but it no longer dominates. You have met it, managed it, negotiated with it. The house hums quietly with activity. Fire crackles, water steams, people move with purpose. The morning has found its footing. You take a steady breath. It rises and falls easily now. No fog near the hearth, no sting in the lungs, just air warmed enough to be kind. With washing done, you turn naturally toward the next necessity, knowing the rhythm of the morning well. Each step builds on the last. Winter mornings reward those who move in sequence, and so clean and steady you step forward, ready for whatever the day requires next. Hunger arrives quietly, not as a demand but as a suggestion. You notice it while standing near the hearth, hands warm, face clean, the house finally cooperating with the day. Your stomach tightens just enough to remind you that warmth alone is not fuel. Morning requires something solid. The table becomes active now, not crowded, just purposeful. A loaf appears dense and dark, wrapped carefully to keep it from drying out too quickly. Bread like this is not soft in the way you might expect. It is firm, heavy in the hand, built to last rather than impress. When you press your thumb into it, the surface resists, then yields slowly. Household account books make it clear that breakfast in winter rarely aimed for variety. Repetition was not a flaw, it was reliability. Bread porridge, leftover vegetables if there were any, perhaps a small portion of salted meat on better mornings. Enough to work, enough to endure. You take a knife and cut a slider. The sound is dull and solid, no crust shattering theatrically. Just steady pressure and release as crumbs scatter lightly across the table. You brush them aside without thinking. Waste is not dramatic here. It is avoided quietly. Someone sets a pot closer to the fire and stirs. The contents are thickening oats or cornmeal swelling slowly in warm water. Steam rises more confidently now, carrying a faint grain scent with it. It smells plain, comforting, honest. No sweetness, no spice, just nourishment. A small but telling practice involves saving the warmest part of breakfast for those who needed it most. Children, elderly family members, someone who had been ill. You notice portions being adjusted subtly without comment. Care expresses itself this way here through distribution rather than words. You take your bread closer to the hearth and hold it there briefly, letting the surface warm. This is not to toast it, just to take the chill off. Cold food is harder to swallow on cold mornings. Experience has taught that too. There is still disagreement among researchers about how often hot breakfasts were the norm during winter. Fuel costs effort. Time matters. Some suggest mornings relied heavily on cold food. Others argue that warm porridge was prioritized despite the work. Standing here, you sense that flexibility ruled. What mattered was not tradition, but circumstance. You sit and take your first bite. The bread is chewy, filling. It demands attention. Eating is slower this way, deliberate. You chew thoroughly, not from etiquette, but necessity. Digestion works better when rushed less. Winter teaches patience in unexpected places. The porridge is ready now. Someone ladles it into bowls, careful not to spill. Steam rises, fogging the air briefly. You bring the bowl close, letting heat warm your hands. The ceramic or wood feels alive with it. You inhale the steam, once appreciating the moisture it adds to the air in your lungs. A practical workaround many families relied on involved adding small amount of animal fat or milk when available, not for flavor alone, but for calories. Fat mattered, energy mattered, taste was secondary. You taste the richness, now subtle but satisfying. You eat slowly, spoons scraping softly against the bowl. The sound blends with crackling fire and low conversation. Morning voices stay quiet, not from rule but habit. Loudness and feels out of place this early, especially in winter. As you eat, warmth spreads inward. Food does that in a way fire cannot. You feel it settle in your chest, your stomach, your limbs. Strength returns in increments. The earlier tension in your shoulders eases further. You sit back slightly supported by the chair and breathe. Surviving letters sometimes mention how much better work felt after eating even a small amount. Hunger makes cold sharper, food dulls it. The difference is immediate and noticeable. You experience that shift and are grateful for it. You glance towards the window again. Sunlight reaches farther inside, touching the floor near the table. Dust motes drift slowly through the beam, visible now that light has committed to the day. Even air feels heavier with presence. Someone pours a bit of warm liquid into a cup and hands it to you. It might be plain water warmed near the fire, or something brewed lightly from herbs. There is no expectation of caffeine, stimulation is unnecessary, warmth is enough. An overlooked detail in discussions of colonial mornings is how much eaten anchored time. Breakfast marked the true start of the workday more clearly than waking did. Until food was taken, the day felt provisional. Now, with bowls emptied and crumbs brushed aside, that provisional state ends. You finish the last bite and rest the bowl on the table. It leaves a faint ring of moisture behind. You wipe it away immediately. Wood does not forgive neglect easily. Maintenance is constant. Children nearby lick spoons clean, then hand them back without fuss. Dishes will be washed later once water is warmer. For now they are stacked neatly ready. Some historians have pushed back against the idea that colonial meals were joyless. While simple, they were shared. That mattered. Eating together warmed more than bodies. Sitting here now, you feel that quiet cohesion. No celebration, just presence. You stand slowly, careful not to rush digestion. Movement resumes naturally. Someone reaches for boots, another for a shawl. The morning transitions again smoothly without announcement. You stretch once more, arms overhead, feeling how much easier it is now compared to earlier. Your fingers are steady. Your feet respond willingly. Food has done its work. The hearth remains steady behind you, its job ongoing. The table clears. The room opens up. Breakfast leaves no clutter, only readiness. You take one last sip from the cup, warmth sliding easily down your throat, and set it aside. Hunger is gone. Cold is manageable. The morning has moved fully into its working phase. As you turn toward the next task, you do so grounded and fueled, aware that this simple meal has quietly changed everything. Winter mornings are not conquered by comfort, but by sequence, warmth, cleanliness, food. And now, with all three in place, you step forward into the rest of the day. Children wake fully now, not all at once, but in stages. You notice it in the way movement becomes less tentative and more spontaneous. A chair scrapes back a little too loudly. Someone laughs and is gently hushed more by habit than necessity. The house tolerates sound better, now that it is warm. You watch a child tug on a sleeve that refuses to cooperate, fabric stiff and unyielding from the cold. Small fingers work patiently, copying motions learned over many mornings like this. Help arrives only when truly needed. Independence is encouraged early, not out of ideology but practicality. Everyone has work to do. Family journals from the period frequently note how early children were expected to participate in morning routines. Not heavy labour necessarily, but contribution. Carrying small items, holding a door, feeding animals. These tasks taught rhythm more than responsibility. You see that lesson unfolding now. A small voice asks a question about the day ahead. The answer is brief and honest. Cold, work, supper later. Children here learn quickly that the future is discussed in concrete terms. Fantasy does not warm hands or fill bellies. Someone lifts a younger child closest to the hearth, turning them gently so both sides warm evenly. The child leans into it without protest, eyes half closed, absorbing heat like a cat. This closeness is practical, but it also feels tender. Winter demands cooperation, and affection often travels along practical routes. You notice how children cluster near warmth instinctively, no instruction needed. They feel gradients the way adults do, perhaps more acutely. A step too far from the fire and they retreat. A step closer and they relax. Their bodies learn the house faster than their words do. There remains debate among historians about how childhood was experienced emotionally in such environments. Some argue that early responsibility shortened innocence. Others suggest that shared routines created security. Watching this quiet choreography, you lean toward the latter. Predictability has its own comfort. A quirky domestic detail surfaces as someone hands a child a small object to occupy them. A smooth stone, a carved bit of wood, simple things that fit easily in a pocket. Toys existed, but they were often practical or improvised. Entertainment did not require novelty, just familiarity. You bend slightly to help tire fastening your fingers, moving confidently now. The cold no longer interferes. You feel useful, grounded. Children accept assistance without ceremony. Gratitude is assumed, not verbalized. Words are saved for when they matter. The room grows busier but not chaotic. Everyone seems to know where to stand, when to move. Paths are followed carefully to avoid collisions. The house feels smaller when full, but also more alive. Winter compresses space, drawing people together physically as well as socially. You notice a child watching the fire, closely fascinated by the way flames move. They lean forward, then pull back when heat becomes too much. Curiosity is balanced with caution. That balance is taught early and reinforced often. Records from the time suggest that children learned many safety rules through observation rather than explanation. Fire was ever present. Danger was understood implicitly. You see that learning happening now quietly without lectures. Someone hands a child a piece of bread saved from breakfast, not a treat, just sustenance. The child eats slowly, crumbs clinging to their fingers. They lick them clean without embarrassment. Nothing here is wasted. Even habits follow that logic. The smell of smoke clings more strongly now as a movement stirs the air. It settles into hair and clothing, becoming part of everyone. Children will carry that scent outside with them, trailing it into the cold. It marks them as belonging to this place. You help adjust a shawl around small shoulders, tucking fabric closer to trap warmth. The child does not resist. They lift their chin automatically. This motion has been practiced many times. Winter routines become muscle memory before they become memory at all. Some modern interpretations underestimate how much children contributed to household morale. Their presence filled space with motion and sound, breaking monotony. Watching them now, you feel that effect. The house feels less heavy with children awake. A brief disagreement flares over who sits closest to the fire. It is resolved quickly, not by argument but rotation. Everyone will have a turn. Fairness here is pragmatic. No one stays warm forever. No one stays cold forever either. You notice how quickly children adjust to discomfort. Cold fingers become an inconvenience rather than a crisis. Hunger becomes a reminder rather than a complaint. These adaptations happen early and quietly, shaped by necessity more than instruction. There is still uncertainty among scholars about how seasonal hardship affected long-term development. Did it build resilience or merely normalize hardship? Observing this morning, you suspect both. Children adapt because they must, but they also find moments of ease within that structure. Someone opens the door briefly to fetch something just outside. Cold air rushes in sharply, cutting through the room. Children react instantly, retreating closer to the fire. The door closes quickly. Balance is restored. Lessons reinforced without words. You guide a child toward their boots, still stiff with cold. They grimace when leather resists, then laugh. The sound is brief but genuine. Laughter warms more than it should, you think. You kneel to help guide a foot in fingers steady. The child wiggles, toes testing. Satisfaction follows when the boot settles correctly. Small victories matter in winter. As more children prepare to head out or take on tasks, the house reaches a new rhythm. Morning is no longer about waking, it is about doing. Children mirror adults in this transition, stepping naturally into roles expected of them. You stand again and survey the room. The fire burns steadily, the table is clear, children are dressed, fed and focused. The house feels organised, purposeful. Winter has not been defeated, but it has been managed. You catch the eye of one child and share a brief smile. No words, just acknowledgement. This morning, like so many before, it has been navigated together. With children awake and the household fully engaged, the day shifts outward. Tasks will move beyond the walls soon. Cold waits patiently outside, ready to test everyone again. But for now, inside this pocket of warmth and emotion, the morning holds steady. Balance between endurance and routine, shaped quietly by many small hands learning how to belong to winter. Animals make their presence known before you see them. A low shift of weight, breath that sounds heavier than any human's, a faint scrape from just beyond the wall. Winter blurs boundaries, and on mornings like this, the line between house and barn feels thinner than usual. You step closer to the back of the house where the air carries a different scent. Earthier. Warmer in a way fire cannot explain. Livestock are nearby. Not inside the main living space, but close enough to matter. Their bodies generate heat constantly, and winter makes use of every reliable source. Archaeological layouts and surviving farm structures indicate that animals were often kept adjacent to living quarters during colder months, not out of affection but efficiency. Proximity conserved warmth, reduced labour, and simplified care. You feel the logic immediately. Distance is costly when snow hardens the ground. You open a door or lift a latch, carefully letting the smell roll in. It is strong but familiar. Hay, manure, warm hide. The scent settles into your clothing quickly. You barely notice after the first breath. Winter dulls sensitivity in some ways, sharpens it in others. A cow shifts hooves, scraping against packed earth. Its breath rises in thick clouds, visible even in the dim light. You feel the heat radiating from its flank when you step close. It is startling how effective it is. No flicker, no maintenance, just steady warmth. You move slowly, deliberately. Animals read motion better than sound. They know the morning routine as well as you do. Feeding, checking, cleaning. These tasks anchor the day. Fire and food matter, but animals come close behind. There has long been discussion among historians about how widespread indoor or near-indoor animal keeping truly was. Regional climate, animal type, and household size all influence decisions. Watching this arrangement now, you sense flexibility rather than rule. People adapted layouts to winter rather than following fixed ideals. You scoop feed with practiced motions, hands moving confidently now that warmth has returned to them. Grain rustles softly. The sound draws attention immediately. Animals lean forward, eager but patient. They trust the sequence. Morning always brings this. A lesser noted detail is how much animal behaviour influenced human pacing. You cannot rush feeding without consequence. Spilled grain attracts pests. Sudden movements startle. Calm efficiency keeps everyone safer. Winter mornings teach restraint through necessity. You check water next. Ice forms quickly even indoors if the air is cold enough. You break a thin layer, carefully listening to the crack travel outward. The sound is sharp but brief. You remove floating shards and set them aside. Water matters as much to animals as it does to you. The cold bites harder here, away from the hearth's reach. Your breath fogs again. Fingers cool quickly despite gloves or sleeves. You work faster without rushing, aware of how easily warmth gained can be lost. Some period accounts mention that tending animals first thing in the morning helped people warm themselves physically. Lifting buckets, carrying feed, movement against resistance. You feel that benefit now. Muscles engage, blood flows. Cold recedes temporarily. You pause to rest a hand against the cow's side, feeling steady warmth through thick hide. It grounds you in a way fire does not. This heat is alive, responsive. The animal flicks an ear but does not move away. Contact is familiar. Nearby, a chicken rustles feathers, puffed dramatically against the cold. Birds exaggerate winter like this, making themselves look larger to trap heat. You admire the strategy. It works. You finish feeding and step back, surveying the space. Everything appears in order. Animals settle into eating. The sounds soften. chewing replaces shifting. The barn area feels calmer now, warmer in a collective sense. You close the door behind you, carefully sealing that warmth in and cold out as best you can. The latch clicks softly. The smell lingers on your clothes, but you accept it. It will fade later, or it will not. Either way, it signals work done. Back in the main room, the contrast is noticeable. Fire heat feels short now, by comparison drier. You stand near the hearth again, warming hands that cooled quickly outside. The transition between spaces remind you how varied winter mornings can be within a single household. Some modern discussions frame animal proximity as unpleasant or unsanitary. That perspective misses the context. Survival reshapes priorities. Warmth, efficiency, and predictability mattered more than comfort in the modern sense. Standing here now, you understand that fully. Children wander over, curious but cautious, peering toward the door you just closed. They wrinkle their noses briefly, then move on. The smell is not remarkable to them. It has always been part of winter. You rub your hands together once more, feeling warmth return. The earlier sting fades quickly now. Your body is better prepared. Each task makes the next easier. Outside sunlight climbs higher. It reflects off snow or frost with a brightness that promises nothing about temperature. Light lies easily, cold does not. You take a moment to stretch, rolling shoulders, flexing fingers. Feeding animals has warmed you more thoroughly than standing still ever could. Movement proves itself again. Someone nearby remarks quietly that the animals are calm today. You nod. Calm animals mean a smoother day. Winter demands cooperation from all living things, and today seems willing enough. There is no lingering in the barn area. Once tasks are done, you move on. Standing still invites cold, or you step back fully into the house, letting the fire reclaim you. As you warm again, you notice how the morning has layered itself. Fire, food, children, and animals. Each piece added in sequence, building a structure of routine strong enough to hold against winter's pressure. You glance toward the door that leads outside again. Soon more work will pull you there. Fields, woodpiles, paths hardened by frost. But for now, this interlude of shared warmth holds. The animals settle. The house hums quietly. Everyone is accounted for. Winter mornings succeed not by comfort, but by completion of small necessary acts. You take a steady breath, watching it fog briefly before fading near the hearth. The cold is still present, waiting its turn, but you are ready for it now, shaped by routine and warmed by effort. With animals tended and the house balanced once more, the morning presses forward, inviting the next task, the next movement, the next quiet negotiation with winter. Before anyone steps too far into the day, there is always a pause. You feel it now, standing near the window. Fire steady behind you, the house warm enough to function. This pause is not rest, it is assessment. Winter demands that you look outward before committing inward energy. You push the shutter or curtain aside just enough to see clearly. The glass is still cool beneath your fingers, but no longer numbing. Outside, the world looks deceptively calm. Snow lies smooth if it fell overnight unbroken, except for faint tracks near the house. If there is no snow, the ground appears dark and rigid, sealed tight by frost. The sky tells you more than any calendar ever could. Its colour, its clarity, the way light spreads just hesitates near the horizon. This morning it is bright but sharp. Clear skies in winter often mean colder air. Clouds trap warmth. Their absence promises nothing gentle. You lean closer, scanning for movement. Smoke from a neighbouring chimney drifts straight up before thinning. That suggests little wind. Good for work that requires precision. Dangerous for cold. Still air lets temperatures drop lower overnight. Your breath fogs the glass slightly as you exhale, then fades. Farmers and labourers in this period relied heavily on such visual cues. Written almanacs existed, but daily decisions depended more on immediate observation than printed prediction. You feel that instinct now, reading the morning without naming the process. You check the trees next. Bare branches hold still, no sway, no whisper. Another sign, the cold is settled, not passing through. Whatever tasks require outdoor effort will feel heavier today. Muscles will need more coaxing. tools will resist. Someone joins you at the window, standing close enough that you share warmth. No words at first. Both of you look out together, seeing the same things, drawing the same conclusions. This shared reading of the day feels intimate, even if unspoken. There is still uncertainty among modern interpreters about how formalized weather reading truly was within households. Some argue it was intuitive and casual. Others suggest it was taught deliberately, passed down carefully. Watching this quiet exchange, now you suspect it was both. Knowledge lives best when it becomes habit. You glance downward as toward the yard. The path from the door to the woodpile looks solid, its surface dulled by frost. No fresh snow means easier footing, but also harder ground. An axe will bite differently today. You file that away. A small detail often overlooked is how much sound factored into weather judgment. You open the door just a crack and listen. Cold air slips in immediately, sharp and clean. Sound carries farther in cold. You hear a distant knock from somewhere beyond the trees. Wood striking wood, a neighbour beginning their own morning work. That tells you more than sight alone. You close the door quickly, sealing warmth back inside. The brief intrusion of cold leaves a trail along the floor. Children retreat closer to the hearth instinctively. The house adjusts as one body. Someone comments quietly on the cold, not complaining, just noting. That acknowledgement serves a purpose. It aligns expectation. No one will pretend today is easier than it is. You move back to the table and begin sorting tasks mentally. Outdoor work must be timed carefully. Midday offers the best conditions. Early morning cold stiffens joints too much. Late afternoon fades too quickly. The window for heavy labour is narrow. Historical records suggest that winter schedules were more flexible than summer ones, built around temperature rather than light alone. You feel that logic now. Work bends around cold, not the other way around. You reach for gloves, lifting them to test their flexibility. Leather is stiff but workable. You set them near the hearth to soften further. Preparation matters. Rushing outside unprepared costs more in the long run. A curious habit in some households involves stepping outside briefly before fully committing to work, just to let the body register conditions. You step into that ritual, now opening the door again, standing on the threshold. Cold hits your face, immediately sharper than inside air, clean and unforgiving. You do not linger. This is reconnaissance, not endurance. You step back in and close the door, feeling the contrast keenly. Fire heat rushes toward you like relief. You warm your hands once more, reassessing. The cold will not be kind today, but it will be manageable. Some historians question how much agency people felt in shaping their days under such conditions. Did weather dictate everything, or did routine override discomfort? Standing here now, you sense a balance. You cannot control the cold, but you can choose how to meet it. You notice how the house has oriented itself toward the day. Tools lean near the door, boots sit ready, coats hang within reach. The interior prepares for outward movement. This transition feels deliberate, almost ceremonial. Children watch the door with interest, now aware that outside work means separation. Some will stay inside longer. Others will follow soon. Winter divides labour by strength and tolerance as much as by age. You take another look through the window, committing the scene to memory. The way light reflects, the absence of motion, the stillness that promises effort. These details will shape how you remember the day later. Someone suggests waiting a bit longer before heading out. Another nods. Agreement comes easily. Fire has just reached a comfortable rhythm. Leaving now would waste that effort. Timing is everything. You move back towards the hearth, standing close enough to absorb warmth without blocking it. Your body feels ready, but patience still serves you better. Winter rewards those who do not rush its terms. The house settles again, quieter, now focused. This pause is not idle, it is strategy. You feel it in the way everyone waits without fidgeting, conserving heat, conserving energy. Outside, the day continues to brighten, but the cold does not lift. Sunlight offers clarity, not warmth. You know this from experience. You rub your hands together once more, not from need, but habit. Warmth holds, Fingers respond easily. Muscles feel cooperative. This is the moment to commit. Soon boots will go on. Coats will be pulled tight. Doors will open wider and longer. The cold will claim its share of attention again. But for now, this moment belongs to observation, to reading the day before stepping into it. Winter mornings demand respect before action. You take one final look outside, then turn back toward the house, toward the tools and people and fire. Decisions have been made without being spoken aloud. The day has been assessed. The terms are clear, and with that understanding settled, you prepare to move forward, knowing exactly what waits beyond the door. When you finally step outside, the cold does not ease you into it. It takes you all at once. The air grips your face, your ears, the small exposed spaces you thought were covered well enough. You blink, hard eyes watering briefly as they adjust. Inside, warmth feels suddenly distant already, a memory rather than a condition. Your boots meet ground that resists them. Snow, if it lies there, has hardened overnight, its surface crisp and unyielding. If there is no snow, the earth itself feels sealed, locked in place by frost. Each step makes a sound, a crunch, a scrape. Winter announces movement, whether you want it to or not. You pause just beyond the door, letting your body register the shift. Moving too quickly now would waste energy. Cold tightens muscles instantly. You roll your shoulders once, draw a deeper breath, then let it out slowly. The air tastes clean, sharp, almost metallic. People who lived through these winters understood quickly that the outdoors demanded respect, even on ordinary mornings. Surviving diaries often describe the cold not as dramatic, but as persistent. Not an event, but a presence. You feel that presence now, steady and unapologetic. You pull your coat closer, tugging fabric tighter at the collar. The material stiffens in the cold, holding its shape. You welcome that resistance. It reminds you that layers are working, that effort has already been invested. The yard looks different from this angle. Inside it felt manageable. Outside scale returns. Distances matter again. The woodpile seems farther than it did through the window. The path to the well looks longer. Cold stretches space in subtle ways. You take a few more steps, testing your footing. Snow squeaks faintly under pressure, a sound that only happens in deep cold. You note it without a comment. That sound means the temperature has dropped well below comfort. Tools will behave differently today. Wood will split more cleanly, metal will bite harder. Some historical interpretations emphasize how winter reshaped labor patterns outdoors. Tasks were grouped to minimize repeated exposure. Trips were planned carefully. Watching your own movements, now you see that logic guiding you instinctively. Your breath fogs thickly, drifting upward before thinning in the still air. It feels louder out here. Every exhale announces itself. You breathe through your nose when you can warm air before it reaches your lungs. Mouth breathing stings too much. You reach the woodpile and rest a gloved hand against stacked logs. Frost coats the exposed surfaces, turning bark pale and slick. You knock two pieces together lightly. The sound rings sharp and dry. Good wood. This will burn well. A small practical trick many households relied on involved selecting wood carefully by sound rather than sight. Damp wood dulls when struck. Dry wood answers clearly. You trust your ear now without thinking about it. You lift a few pieces, weight settling into your arms. The effort warms you immediately, deeper than fire ever could. Muscles engage, blood moves, cold retreats, slightly pushed back by work. As you turn back toward the house, you notice how quiet the world is. No insects, few birds. Even distant sounds feel muted, as if winter has pressed pause on everything unnecessary. This silence is not empty. It feels full of waiting. Some scholars continue to debate whether people found winter landscapes oppressive or peaceful. The record holds both impressions. Standing here now, you sense how it could be either, depending on the day, the tasks of the body doing the work. You carry the wood carefully, mindful of balance. A slip now would cost more than pride. Cold ground is unforgiving. You move deliberately, choosing stability over speed. The door opens before you reach it. Someone inside has been watching. The exchange is wordless. You step in, wood in hand, cold trailing after you like a shadow. The door closes quickly, sealing the house again. Inside, warmth rushes back, not dramatic, but immediate. You feel it on your cheeks first, then your hands. You set the wood down near the hearth and stand still for a moment, letting contrast do its work. Your face tingles as circulation returns. The sensation is intense but brief. You welcome it. It means your body is responding as it should. The room smells different now, carrying a hint of outside with it. Cold air has a scent all its own, clean, sharp. It fades quickly as fire asserts itself again. You add the new wood to the hearth, watching flame accept it eagerly. The fire responds better to cold wood than damp. Flames rise, then settle, steady and reliable. Another small success. You rub your hands together once more, then flex your fingers. They feel strong, capable. Outdoor cold no longer intimidates the same way it did minutes ago. Familiarity dulls its edge. Children glance at the door with curiosity, some excitement mixed with hesitation. Outside looks different now that it has been felt rather than observed. Winter always does. You step back from the hearth, scanning the room. Tools are being gathered, coats adjusted. The household is transitioning, again shifting from preparation to execution. That brief venture outside has recalibrated expectations. Everyone moves with more intention, now aware of what the cold demands. There is no rush, but no lingering either. You take one more steady breath, feeling how easily it moves in warmer air. Then you reach for your gloves again, knowing they will be needed soon. The outside world has made its terms clear. Cold effort consequence. You have accepted them without protest. And with that understanding settled into your muscles and breath, you prepare to step out again this time. Not just to test the morning, but to meet it fully. Snow speaks underfoot in a language you learn quickly. Each step answers back, telling you how cold it truly is. The sound is not soft. It is crisp, almost brittle, a dry crunch that carries farther than you expect. Even without snow, the ground has a voice. Frosted earth scrapes and resists, giving nothing away without effort. You place your feet carefully now. Balance matters more than speed. The cold has made the surface unpredictable. A thin glaze hides in shaded spots. Packed paths hold firm while open ground betrays you with uneven patches. You adjust your stride, shortening it slightly, keeping your weight centered. This is not fear. It is experience. Winter walking changes posture. You notice it in your own body. Shoulders lower, arms stay closer to your sides. Movement become economical. Every unnecessary motion costs warmth. People learn this quickly, often without being able to explain it. The body teaches the lesson repeatedly until it sticks. Accounts from the period suggest that falls were common in winter, especially during early morning hours. Ice did not announce itself clearly. Snow disguised hazards. You feel that caution settle into you now as a steady awareness, not anxiety, just attention. You test the ground with your heel before committing your weight. The habit feels natural. A small tap tells you more than sight alone ever could. The surface holds, you move forward. The air feels heavier when you walk. Breathing requires intention. Cold tightens the chest slightly, reminding you to slow your pace. You breathe in through your nose, letting warmth build before it reaches your lungs. Exhaling through the mouth releases a plume that hangs briefly, then drifts away. Some observers of the time noted how winter travel reshaped daily routes. Paths shifted to avoid shaded ice. Shortcuts were abandoned. Familiarity did not guarantee safety. Watching your own feet now, you understand that landscape knowledge becomes seasonal. Summer maps do not apply. You reach a section where snow has been compacted by repeated use. Here the crunch changes pitch. It sounds deeper, more solid. This is safer ground. Many feet have tested it already. You follow their lead, letting collective experience guide you. A small practical trick passed quietly between neighbours involved scattering ash or straw on slick paths to improve traction. It was not elegant, but it worked. You spot traces of it now. Dark flecks breaking up white or dulling the shine of ice. Someone has been thoughtful ahead of you. You slow briefly where the path slopes. The cold has sharpened the angle. Gravity feels more assertive. You shift your weight forward slightly, knees soft, ready to catch yourself if needed. This posture becomes second nature in winter. There remains disagreement among historians about how far people travelled on foot during severe winters. Some argue activity shrank dramatically. Others point to evidence of continued movement just altered. Standing here mid-step, you suspect distance mattered less than purpose. Necessary movement continued. Optional movement waited. You pass a fence line, its rails rimmed with frost. The crystals sparkle faintly in the growing light. It is beautiful in a quiet, indifferent way. Winter offers scenes like this without concern for your comfort. You appreciate it anyway. Your boots begin to feel more cooperative now that you have been moving steadily. Leather softens slightly with warmth from your feet. The earlier stiffness eases. This small change improves balance noticeably. You walk with more confidence. A nearby tree sheds a clump of snow with a sudden thump. The sound startles you despite yourself. Winter keeps attention from sharp, even small surprises feel larger in the quiet. You glance down and notice your footprints behind you, dark impressions against pale ground. They are clear, deliberate. Evidence of passage. They will last longer than you expect in this cold. Tracks persist in winter, holding memory until sun or new snow erases them. Some period writings mention how tracks were used to gauge neighbour activity. Who had gone out, who had stayed in. Winter made movement visible in ways other seasons did not. Looking back at your own footprints now, you feel that visibility keenly. You approach a task area, perhaps the well, perhaps a shed, and pause again. Standing still reminds you quickly why movement matters. Cold creeps back into joints when effort stops. You shift your weight, stamping lightly once or twice, not impatiently, just practically. The well area demands extra care. Ice gathers here easily. You approach at an angle, testing each step. The ground responds honestly, it holds but barely. You keep your movements smooth, avoiding sudden shifts. A common winter practice involved laying boards near wells or water sources to improve footing. You notice one now weathered but solid. You step onto it gratefully, feeling the difference immediately. Wood grips better than ice. You complete the task quickly, efficiently. Lingering invites cold. You lift what you need, secure it, and turn back without delay. Winter favours decisiveness. As you walk back toward the house, you choose your path, carefully retracing safer ground rather than cutting straight across. Shorter is not always better. Stability wins. The house grows larger as you approach its outline, steady and familiar. Smoke rises straight from the chimney, a vertical line against the sky. That sight anchors you. Warmth exists. It waits. Some historians have suggested that winter labour encouraged mindfulness long before the concept had a name. Attention to footing, breath, balance. You experience that focus now, present without strain, attentive without anxiety. Your breath fogs heavily again as you near the door. The contrast between outside and inside is already preparing itself in your body. You feel anticipation, not longing, just readiness. You reach the threshold and pause briefly, brushing snow from your boots. This small act matters. Wet snow melts inside, turning to ice later. Maintenance begins at the door. The door opens, warmth spilling out like a held breath finally released. You step inside and close it quickly, sealing winter out as best you can. The sound of the latch feels final, satisfying. Inside, you stand still for a moment, letting your body adjust. Cheeks tingle. Fingers ache, then warm. The sensation is intense but short-lived. You welcome it as proof of circulation returning. You glance back toward the door once more, knowing you will open it again soon. Winter work is never finished in one trip, but each careful crossing builds confidence. As you move toward the hearth again, boots thudding softly on the floor, you realize how much attention winter walking demands and how quietly it teaches. Balance. Patience, awareness. These lessons sink into the body first, long before the mind names them. And as you warm once more, snow melting from your boots, you carry that knowledge forward, ready for the next venture beyond the door. Morning work begins without ceremony. There is no announcement. No clear dividing line between preparation and labour. It simply happens. You notice it in the way tools are picked up, in the way bodies shift from warming themselves to applying that warmth to effort. The house has done what it can. Now the rest belongs to you. You stand near the door. Again, boots finally secure, gloves pulled tight. The leather has softened just enough to cooperate. That small mercy matters. Cold tools resist careless hands, and winter punishes impatience quickly. Outside waits a list of tasks that cannot be postponed. Wood to split, paths to clear, water to fetch, fences to check, none of them dramatic on their own, but together they form the backbone of the day. Winter mornings compress responsibility. What is delayed now becomes harder later. You step out once more, breath immediately visible, body bracing automatically. This time there is less shock. Familiarity dulls the edge so it is. But so longer surprise. You carry an axe or similar tool, its handle cold even through gloves. Metal draws heat greedily. You adjust your grip, keeping fingers moving to maintain circulation. Stillness is the enemy out here. Wood waits where you left it, logs stacked neatly. Surfaces rimmed with frost. You choose one and set it in place. The first swing feels stiff, muscles protest briefly, then movement takes over. The second swing lands more cleanly, the third finds rhythm. Sound changes with each strike. Dry wood answers with a sharp crack. The split runs straight clean. That tells you the cold has worked in your favour. Frozen fibres part more easily, winter takes, but it also gives. Contemporary observations from the period often mention how winter altered the behaviour of materials themselves. Wood, metal, earth all respond differently under cold pressure. You learn these changes through your hands rather than books. The axe teaches quickly. You split steadily, not rushing. Breath times itself with motion. Inhale as you lift. Exhale as you strike. The pattern warms you from the inside out. Cold retreats to the edges again, waiting for you to stop. Nearby, someone clears a path with a shovel. Snow lifts and falls in controlled arcs. Each movement is deliberate. Overexertion risks sweat, and sweat invites cold. This balance between effort and restraint defines winter labour more than strength ever could. There has long been discussion among historians about how physically taxing winter work truly was compared to summer labour. Some argue it was lighter due to frozen ground limiting activity. Others suggest the cold amplified every movement. Watching your own breath plume with each swing, you lean toward the latter. Effort feels heavier when the air itself resists you. You pause briefly, resting the axe head on the ground. Not from exhaustion, but strategy. Short rests prevent sweat. You shake out your arms lightly, keeping blood moving. Fingers tingle but remain responsive. That is the goal. A small but clever habit practiced by many involved keeping a rhythm of work that allowed warmth to build without overheating. Split for a few minutes, stack for a few more, move rather than stop. You find yourself following this pattern naturally. You lift split pieces and stack them neatly. Organisation matters here. Piles that topple waste energy. Clean stacks save time later. Even in cold order reduces effort. The air remains still. Sound carries far. You hear another axe strike somewhere beyond your immediate view. A neighbour, perhaps starting their own day. The rhythm echoes faintly, connecting households through shared labour. Winter mornings synchronise people without them needing to meet. Some written accounts suggest that these shared soundscapes provided reassurance. Knowing others were awake, working, surviving alongside you mattered. Standing here now, you feel that quiet connection. You're not alone in this cold. You bend to lift another log and feel the strain in your back. You adjust your stance immediately. Injury in winter is serious. Healing takes longer when cold stiffens joints and slows circulation. Caution becomes instinctive. A fringe but practical detail occasionally mentioned involves warming the axe handle near the hearth before taking it outside. Even a small temperature increase improved grip and reduced strain. You wish you had done that, but manage without complaint. Experience will remind you next time. You work until warmth builds fully, then step aside, allowing someone else to take your place. Tasks rotate like warmth did earlier near the fire. No one monopolizes the hardest work for long. Winter enforces cooperation through necessity. You move toward another task, perhaps clearing ice from a threshold or checking a fence line. Each job adds another layer of warmth and another layer of readiness. Cold recedes, but never disappears completely. The sun climbs higher now, but offers little comfort. Light brightens surfaces without softening them. Frost still grips shaded areas. You remain a tentative testing ground before committing weight. Interpretations vary on how people mentally frame this kind of work. Some historians describe it as grim endurance. Others point to evidence of satisfaction and pride. As you finish a task and step back to inspect it, you feel that second interpretation resonate. Completion brings a quiet reward. You rub your hands together briefly, then tuck them back into gloves. They are warm enough now. The earlier ache has vanished. Your body has found its working temperature. Nearby, someone calls a call to short instruction or update. Voices outdoors stay practical. Wind carries words unpredictably. Conversations shorten accordingly. Meaning is condensed. You glance toward the house. Smoke still rises steadily. That sight anchors you. No matter how long you stay out here, warmth waits there, earned and maintained by others. This knowledge steadies you. Another task finishes, then another. Morning work accumulates like this, piece by piece. There is no sense of rush, but no waste either. Winter does not forgive inefficiency. Some modern readers imagine winter mornings as bleak stretches of suffering. That view misses the texture. Yes, cold dominates, but structure softens it, routine shapes it, purpose fills space where comfort cannot. You pause again, standing still just long enough to notice cold creeping back toward your knees. That is your cue. You shift, move, lift, act. Stillness is temporary outdoors, motion keeps you alive. The sky now holds full daylight. Shadows shortened slightly. The hardest cold of the morning has passed its peak, even if temperature has not changed much. The day has momentum now. You finish the last immediate task and turn back toward the house, breath heavy but controlled. Muscles feel worked, not strained. This is the ideal outcome. At the door you stamp boots lightly to shed snow and ice. Small maintenance now prevents larger problems later. You open the door and step inside, closing it quickly behind you. Warmth meets you again, deeper this time. The contrast is less shocking now that your body is active. Heat seeps in rather than rushing. You remove gloves and flex fingers satisfied. The morning has moved fully into its working phase. Chores are underway. Effort has replaced hesitation. Winter still watches, but it no longer dictates every movement. You take a steady breath, letting it settle without fog near the hearth. Work has warmed you thoroughly. The cold has been answered. And as you set tools aside, briefly preparing for the next sequence of tasks, you realize this is the true shape of a winter morning. Not a single hardship, but a chain of manageable ones, each met in turn, each softened by routine movement and shared effort. Water waits for no season. That truth becomes unavoidable in winter. You feel it as you step back outside with empty buckets or containers. They're weight light now, but promising strain on the return. Hydration, cleaning animals, or cooking, all of it depends on this one task. It cannot be skipped. It can only be managed. The path to the well looks familiar and different at the same time. Familiar because you've walked it countless mornings. Different because winter reshapes everything subtly overnight. Snow drifts where ground was clear yesterday. Ice films spots that held firm before. You adjust without thinking, feet finding the safer line almost automatically. The well itself stands quiet, its wooden frame rimmed with frost. Metal fittings gleam dully in the cold light. You place a hand on the handle, briefly testing. It bites through gloves immediately. You pull your hand back and flex your fingers, warming them with motion before committing. Historical household inventories make clear that water access dictated daily rhythms more than nearly any other factor. Wells were central not just physically but temporally. Fetching water early prevented freezing later. You feel that urgency now, not rushed but focused. You step onto the board laid near the well, grateful for its grip. Without it, ice would make this task far more dangerous. Someone thought ahead. Winter rewards foresight. You grasp the handle again and begin to turn it slowly. The rope responds stiffly at first, fibers tightened by cold. You keep your motion smooth, steady. Jerking would only make things worse. The bucket descends with a muted creak sound travelling down into darkness. As you wait for it to fill, you listen. Water sounds different in winter. Heavier, slower. The splash is duller, less lively. Cold dampens sound as much as it dampens everything else. There is still debate among historians about and how often wells froze completely in certain regions. Accounts vary, widely influenced by depth, construction and local climate. Watching the rope move, now feeling resistance but not failure, you appreciate a well built to survive hard seasons. You begin to draw the bucket up. This is where effort shows. The rope pulls against you, weight increasing steadily. Cold stiffens muscles, making them less forgiving. You lean back slightly, using body weight rather than arm strength alone. Experience guides you. The bucket emerges rim crusted with ice almost immediately. Water sloshes darkly beneath. You set it down carefully, avoiding sudden movement. Spilled water becomes ice in moments. You secure the lid or cover, quickly minimizing exposure. A lesser-known practice involved dropping a small amount of oil on the surface of stored water to slow freezing. Whether this was common or occasional remains unclear, but the ingenuity behind it speaks to how persistent the problem was. You rely instead on speed and insulation. You lift the bucket, adjusting grip until it balances well. The weight is reassuring in a way. Water means continuation. It means cooking, cleaning, warmth later in the form of steam. You begin the return walk carefully. Each step now carries more consequence. Slipping would mean injury and loss. You shorten your stride, keep your center low, eyes scanning constantly. The cold sharpens focus like nothing else. You feel the bucket's cold radiate through your gloves. Fingers begin to numb despite movement. You shift the handle, slightly changing pressure points. This buys you time. Some pictorial descriptions mention that winter water carrying was one of the most dreaded daily tasks, not because of the weight, but because of the risk. Standing water froze, spills became hazards. You understand that anxiety now balanced against necessity. Halfway back, you pause briefly. Not long enough to cool, just enough to reset grip and posture. You flex your hands once, then continue. Breath fogs heavily. Your shoulders tighten against the cold. The house looks inviting, now smoke rising steadily from the chimney. That sight keeps you moving. You focus on it, letting it anchor your attention away from discomfort. As you reach the door, someone opens it for you without being asked. The exchange is seamless. Cooperation here is instinctive. You step inside and set the bucket down immediately, letting relief wash through you as warmth meets cold hands. Your fingers ache as circulation returns. The sensation is intense but brief. You welcome it as proof that feeling remains. You rub hands together gently, then hold them near the fire until warmth settles. The bucket sits near the hearth now, steam beginning to rise faintly from its surface. Moisture enters the air again, easing dryness. This water will be used carefully. Every drop matters more in winter. You glance back toward the door, already knowing you'll make this trip again before the day ends. Winter does not reduce demand. It increases it. Some historians have questioned whether winter routines created greater physical resilience or simply enforced endurance. Carrying water like this answers that quietly. Strength builds because it must. There is no alternative. You step aside as someone else approaches the bucket, dipping a ladle carefully. They do not rush. Sudden movement could spill. Everyone understands this implicitly. You remove your gloves and set them near the hearth to dry. Moisture trapped in leather invites cold later. Maintenance begins immediately. Winter allows no neglect. Your body feels workless now, but steady. Muscles warm, breath even. The initial shock of the morning has fully faded. In its place sits a quiet competence. Outside the well stands ready for the next visit, ice already reforming along its rim. The cycle continues whether you acknowledge it or not. You take a moment to stretch your shoulders, easing tension. The morning has demanded much already, and it will demand more. But each completed task builds confidence. The house hums softly with activity again. Water sloshes, fire crackles, people move with purpose. Winter presses from outside, but inside balance holds. You look at the bucket once more full and secure, and feel a small satisfaction. This simple act supports everything that follows. Without it, nothing else works. As you turn towards the next task, hands warm, breath steady, you carry with you the knowledge that winter mornings are built on such moments. Heavy, careful, necessary moments that keep life moving forward one bucket at a time. Wood never stops being relevant in winter, even after splitting, stacking and feeding the fire once it calls you back again. You notice it in the way the hearth consumes logs steadily, never greedily, but never resting either. Warmth is temporary, fuel is constant. You return to the woodpile with a practiced sense of timing. Too early and you waste heat carrying more than needed. Too late and the fire dips the room, cooling just enough to be felt. Winter sharpens this judgment. You feel when it is time without looking. The pile has changed shape since earlier. Gaps appear where pieces were taken. Snow has fallen into those spaces, settling lightly. You brush it away with your glove before selecting the next logs. Moisture matters now. Even a little dampness complicates burning later. Surviving farm records show how much daily labour revolved around fuel management alone. Not gathering wood once, but constantly. The idea of finishing this task entirely never existed. Wood was a daily relationship, not a one-time chore. You feel that truth in your bones now. You lift a few pieces, choosing ones that feel right by weight and sound. Dry logs answer when knocked together. Heavier, dull-sounding pieces stay behind. Experience saves you trouble later. As you carry the wood inside, the contrast between cold air and fire, warmed space registers again, but less dramatically than before. Your body has learned the transition. Cheeks tingle briefly. Breath steadies quickly. Adaptation has taken hold. You place the wood near the hearth, stacking it neatly so air can circulate. Disorder here invites frustration later. Logs that roll or crowd each other burn poorly. Organisation supports warmth as much as flame does. A small domestic habit rarely mentioned, but widely practiced, involved rotating wood stacks so older, drier pieces were used first. You notice this arrangement now. Some logs sit closer to the hearth to finish drying, others wait farther back. Nothing is random. You add one log to the fire and watch how it responds. Flame wraps around the edges, slowly testing before committing. Smoke lifts cleanly. You nod. This piece will burn well. Another small confirmation earned. There remains disagreement among historians about how heavily forest depletion affected daily fuel decisions in some regions. In areas where wood grew scarce, every log carried more weight. Standing here now, you sense how attentiveness would sharpen quickly under such pressure. Waste would feel personal. You step back and warm your hands briefly, then turn to another task. Fire no longer needs constant attention, but it does require regular check-ins. Winter mornings teach you to think in loops rather than straight lines. Nearby, someone arranges kindling, splitting thinner pieces from a larger log. The sound is lighter, sharper. These will catch quickly later when the fire dips. Preparation stacks upon preparation. You notice how the smell of fresh split wood differs from older logs. It carries a faint sweetness, sharp and clean. That scent blends with smoke and wool and earth, creating the layered aroma of a working winter house. Some modern readers imagine fire tending as monotonous. In practice, it is meditative. Each adjustment brings immediate feedback. Too much fuel and flame smothers. Too little, and it starves. Balance rewards attention. You glance toward the window again. Sunlight reaches farther into the room now, touching the floorboards near the hearth. Dust motes drift lazily in the beam. Light changes space even when it does not change temperature. You stretch once more, rolling shoulders, loosening arms. Carrying wood warms you deeply, but tension builds quietly. Winter teaches maintenance not just of tools and fire, but of the body itself. A fringe practice mentioned in a few household letters involved warming boots or mittens near the fire between outings, not close enough to scorch, just enough to soften leather and drive out dampness. You set your gloves there now, positioning them carefully. This small act will matter later. Children pass through the room again, moving more freely now. Warmth has given them confidence. One pauses to watch the fire, mesmerized by the way flames move around a log. You let them watch, knowing caution will pull them back when heat grows too intense. You add another log to the fire, not because it needs it immediately, but to anticipate the next cooling. Winter mornings reward foresight. Reaction always costs more energy than prevention. Some historians suggest that fuel management shaped daily mental rhythms as much as physical ones. Time was not segmented by hours, but by burn rates. Standing here now, you feel that truth. You think in terms of how long this log will last, not what time it is. The fire settles again, stable and cooperative. You step away, trusting it for a while. Trust here is earned through repetition, not assumption. Outside, the wind shifts slightly. You hear it brush the house, a soft scrape along the wall. That change will affect draft soon. You file it away without dwelling on it. You move toward another small task, perhaps checking a latch or clearing ash. Each action feels connected, now part of a larger pattern rather than isolated effort. Winter mornings weave tasks together tightly. You glance back at the woodpile inside, reassured by its presence. Enough fuel for now, enough warmth to proceed. This sense of sufficiency is rare in winter, and you recognize it as something to appreciate. The house feels balanced again, fire burns steadily, water waits, wood is ready, people move with confidence. The morning has found its stride. You take a steady breath near the hearth. No fog, no sting, just warm air and the quiet sound of flame. The cold waits outside, but inside control has been established. And as you step into the next loop of tasks you carry with you, the understanding that winter mornings are not conquered once, they are managed continuously, log by log, breath by breath, until the day finally loosens its grip. You notice the neighbours before you see them. Winter carries sound farther and movement leaves traces that linger. A dull thud of wood splitting somewhere beyond the fence. A door closing with care. Smoke rising from a chimney you cannot see directly but know well enough to recognise. The morning is unfolding across the landscape in parallel, household by household. You step closer to the window or doorframe, not to watch but to listen. These sounds are reassuring. They mean others are awake, working, managing the same cold you are. Winter narrows the world, but it also connects it in quiet ways. Everyone moves to a similar rhythm now, guided by temperature and light rather than preference. You catch sight of a figure crossing a yard in the distance, bundled thickly, head down, arms held close. No one lingers outdoors longer than necessary. Greetings, if exchanged at all, are brief nods or raised hands. Breath is precious, words are saved. Settlement layouts from the period reveal how close households often stood to one another, not out of social closeness alone, but practicality. Distance meant exposure. Proximity allowed shared resources, shared paths, shared awareness. Standing here now, you feel how the morning binds people together without demanding interaction. You step outside briefly again, not for a task, just to gauge the broader scene. The cold meets you instantly, but you are prepared now. You stand still and listen. Somewhere nearby an axe strikes, another answers a moment later. The sounds overlap briefly, then fall into a staggered pattern. No coordination, just coincidence shaped by similar needs. You notice tracks crossing the snow or frost between properties. Paths form organically this way, reinforced by repetition. No one sets out to make them official. Winter decides which routes survive by making some easier than others. A neighbour pauses near a fence line, adjusting a load. You do not call out. They do not look up. There is no offence in this. Privacy in winter is maintained through restraint rather than distance. Everyone understands the limits imposed by cold. You turn back toward your own house, the door closing quickly behind you. Warmth returns, steady and familiar. The contrast feels less dramatic now. Your body adjusts quickly, evidence of how adaptable it has become in just a few hours. Inside, someone mentions that the neighbour's chimney is smoking well today. It is a small observation, but it carries meaning. It suggests dry wood, a strong fire, a household managing well enough. Concern and curiosity blend quietly in such remarks. There has been long-standing discussion among historians about the nature of community bonds in early settlements, particularly during winter. Were they close-knit by choice or by necessity? Listening to these small acknowledgements, now you sense that the answer lies somewhere between. Survival encouraged awareness. Awareness encouraged connection. You return to your tasks, but the knowledge of others working nearby lingers in your mind. It lightens the load subtly. Shared hardship often does. A knock sounds at the door, soft but deliberate. You open it to find a neighbour standing just outside, breath visible, cheeks flushed from cold. They do not come in immediately. They explain briefly why they are there. A borrowed tool, a question about a fence, an offer to exchange labour later. These interactions are efficient, friendly and brief. You step aside to let them in for a moment, just long enough for them to warm their hands. No invitation is spoken, but none is needed. This exchange has happened countless times before. Winter makes such customs unremarkable. They hold their hands near the hearth, rubbing them together slowly. You notice how quickly colour returns to their fingers. Fire does that for everyone, regardless of whose house it is. Warmth is a shared language. A small anecdote from a letter written in this era describes neighbours keeping track of one another's fires as a form of mutual assurance. Smoke absent too long could mean trouble. Watching this exchange now, you understand how that vigilance developed naturally. The neighbour thanks you and steps back out, tool in hand. The door closes. Cold is kept at bay. The house returns to its steady rhythm. The visit leaves no disruption, only a quiet confirmation that you are part of a network larger than these walls. You glance towards the window again. The figure you saw earlier has moved on. Another appears farther off, smaller against the brightening sky. Winter distances people visually, but it also sharpens awareness. You learn to read signs rather than rely on conversation. Someone inside comments on the weather again, this time with a note of planning. If the cold holds certain tasks will wait. If it lifts even slightly, others can begin. Decisions ripple outward from these observations. It becomes clear that mornings like this are not solitary experiences, even when spent largely alone. They are communal in structure, if not in action. Everyone responds to the same constraints. Everyone measures effort against the same cold. You take a moment to stand near the hearth, hands, warm eyes, half closed, listening. The fire crackles softly. Outside, faint sounds drift in and out of reach. The world feels both small and connected. Some modern perspectives assume that isolation defined winter life. Standing here now, you feel something different. Space may be limited, but awareness is expanded. You know where others are without seeing them. You know what they are likely doing without asking. You return to work with that knowledge settled comfortably in the background. It does not demand attention. It simply exists, like the fire, like the coal. As the morning advances, you notice fewer distant sounds. Tasks finish. People retreat indoors or move farther afield. The initial rush of activity gives way to steadier patterns. Winter mornings peak early, then level out. You check one more time towards the neighbour's chimney. Smoke still rises. Good. You feel a quiet satisfaction at that, even though it changes nothing about your own day. The house feels warmer now, more stable. Movement inside slows slightly. Outside work continues, but at a more deliberate pace. The morning has passed its most demanding phase. You settle into the next task, carrying with you the subtle reassurance of shared effort. Winter does not feel lighter because of it, but it feels less lonely. And in that awareness, you find another kind of warmth, one that fire cannot provide, but which holds just as steadily as the morning continues its slow, cold march forward. Time feels different now, not slower exactly, just less precise. You notice it as you move through the house and yard, no longer checking light every few minutes, no longer gauging warmth constantly. The morning has settled into itself. Whatever hour it is, it feels correct. There is no clock commanding attention. If one exists at all, it hangs quietly consulted only when needed. Most of the day's pacing comes from cues you feel rather than see. The fire's appetite, the sun's position on the floor, the way your body responds to effort. Winter reshapes time into something physical. You pause near the window again, not to assess weather this time, but out of habit. Light now reaches fully across the room, touching places it could not earlier. The shadows have shifted. What felt urgent an hour ago now feels manageable. That change has nothing to do with temperature. It has to do with momentum. People in this period often organize their days around task sequences rather than hours. Morning work flowed into mid-morning, naturally guided by completion rather than schedule. You feel that structure now. One task ends and another presents itself without friction. You notice how conversations reflect this loosened sense of time. No one asks how late it is. Instead, someone remarks that the fire will need more wood soon. Another notes that the animals are settled. These statements function as timestamps without numbers. A child wanders through the room, no longer hovering near the hearth. Confidence restored. They carry something small and purposeful, a tool, a bundle. You note the shift. Earlier warmth was the priority, now usefulness takes over. Some scholars have remarked that winter demanded a different relationship with time, one less abstract and more embodied. Standing here now, you understand that observation. You feel time in your muscles, not your mind. Fatigue and warmth replace minutes and hours. You step outside again briefly, not because you must, but because it feels appropriate. The cold greets you familiarly now, no longer sharp, just present. Your breath fogs, but you barely notice. Your body has accepted the conditions. Sunlight reflects strongly off snow or frost, bright enough to make you squint. You shield your eyes with a hand and smile faintly. Without warmth is a particular winter trick. It offers clarity, not comfort. You walk a short distance, checking something minor, then return inside without urgency. The movement feels smooth, unforced. Earlier, every outing required preparation. Now you trust yourself to manage brief exposures without consequence. Back inside, you notice how the house holds warmth better now. The fire has worked long enough. Walls have absorbed heat, the air feels thicker, kinder. This is the reward for patience. A small, easily missed habit emerges as someone rearranges seating slightly, making room where it makes sense. Space shifts to match the new phase of the day. Winter mornings are dynamic this way. Rooms change purpose subtly as needs evolve. You sit for a moment not to rest deeply, just to let your body recalibrate. Sitting now feels different than it did earlier. It no longer invites sleep. It offers reflection. You stretch your legs out briefly, then pull them back in keeping warmth close. There is still uncertainty among historians about how rigidly daily routines were followed during winter. Some sources suggest strict order. Others imply flexibility. Living this moment, you sense the structure existed but adaptation ruled. Routines bent around conditions rather than breaking against them. You stand again, easily, joints cooperating. The earlier stiffness has vanished completely. Movement feels natural now. Winter mornings demand this progression, cold to effort, effort to warmth, warmth to stability. Someone mentions that midday tasks can begin soon. The statement carries no pressure. It simply acknowledges a shift. The morning phase is concluding. Another cycle approaches. You glance at the hearth. The fire burns low but steady, exactly as intended. It will need attention again, but not urgently. Trust has been earned. Outside sounds are fewer now. The earlier flurry of activity has thinned. Neighbours are deeper into their work. The settlement breathes more slowly. You feel a sense of satisfaction settle over you. Not pride, not accomplishment, just alignment. The morning has unfolded as it should. Nothing dramatic, nothing failed. Some modern interpretations portrayed pre-industrial timekeeping as chaotic. Moments like this suggest something else entirely. Time here is not disordered, it is responsive. It listens to bodies, weather and tools. You move toward the next task, calmly without checking light or fire or door. You already know where everything stands. Awareness has replaced vigilance. As you lift a tool or reach for a bundle, you realize that the morning no longer feels like something to get through. It feels like something you are inside of, fully present, fully capable. Winter still surrounds you. Cold still defines the limits. But within those limits, life proceeds with quiet confidence. And as the day continues to open, no longer tentative, no longer demanding constant adjustment, you carry forward the understanding that time here does not push you. It waits for you to move with it. Your hands tell you the truth before your thoughts do. Even warmed by work and fire, they begin to stiffen again when effort pauses too long. The sensation creeps in quietly first as a dull tightness, then as a faint loss of precision. Fingers do not bend as easily. Grip requires more attention. Winter never stops testing small margins. You notice it while reaching for a tool. The handle feels slightly farther away than it should, as if your fingers must think before closing. You shake your hands once, then again, bringing blood back with motion. The stiffness retreats, but it leaves a reminder behind. This will happen all day. You adjust accordingly. Cold has a way of teaching efficiency. Tasks are chosen and ordered with hands in mind. Fine work waits until warmth is highest. Heavy work fills the colder stretches. This pattern is not written down anywhere. It is learned through repetition and consequence. You rub your palms together briefly, then tuck them inside your sleeves near your body. Heat returns faster there. This small trick buys you time. You have learned not to ignore early signs. Waiting until numbness sets in costs more energy later. You take on another task that requires strength rather than delicacy. Lifting, carrying, pushing, your hands respond better when the work is blunt and rhythmic. Fingers curl around rough surfaces, gripping by habit rather than finesse. The cold interferes less here. The texture of wood feels sharper now, grain more pronounced. Cold heightens sensation in strange ways. You feel splinters sooner, edges stand out, tools demand respect. Gloves help, but they dull touch, just enough to require extra care. You pause again, aware that stopping too long will undo progress. Movement is warmth. You keep your hands busy even while thinking, stacking, shifting, adjusting. Stillness creeps in only when you let it. Written observations from the era often mention numb fingers as one of winter's most persistent frustrations. Faces could be covered, bodies layered, but hands remained exposed by necessity. You feel that limitation now, unavoidable and familiar. You bring your hands back towards the hearth once more, not dramatically, just long enough to restore flexibility. The heat penetrates slowly deeper than earlier because your body is already warm. You flex each finger in turn, testing range of motion. Satisfied, you step away again. A quiet, easily missed habit emerges as you watch others work. Everyone rotates tasks without comment. Someone who is splitting wood switches to stacking. Another moves from carrying to planning. This rotation is not generosity, it is strategy. Hands last longer when not pushed in one way continuously. There remains uncertainty among historians about how much formal knowledge people had about cold-related injury. Medical language was limited, but practical understanding was widespread. People knew what frostbite felt like long before it had a name. They responded early. You feel that early response now. When fingers stiffen, you change position. When grip weakens, you rest briefly. When warmth dips, you move. The body communicates constantly. Winter rewards those who listen. You glance at a child nearby, watching their hands as they work. They shake them lightly, then continue. No one told them to do that. They learned by watching, by feeling, by necessity. Knowledge passes this way most effectively. You take a moment to examine your gloves. Dampness has begun to creep in along the seams. Snowmelt, sweat both become problems quickly. You set them near the hearth again, careful not to scorch. Drying now prevents misery later. A practical workaround used by some involved rotating gloves or mittens throughout the day. letting one pair dry while another was worn. Not everyone had that luxury. Maintenance mattered more than replacement. You choose a task that keeps hands active without soaking them. Sorting, carrying, clearing. Each movement pumps warmth back in, the stiffness recedes once more. The air outside remains sharp. You step into it briefly again, hands tucked into sleeves until movement begins. Cold bites immediately, but your body answers just as fast. Familiarity makes the exchange quicker, less shock, more response. You work steadily, mindful of your fingers. Metal tools draw heat aggressively. You limit contact time, switching grips often. Wood feels kinder by comparison. Even frozen wood insulates slightly. Some accounts from the time described winter mornings as battles with numbness more than cold itself. Standing here now, you understand that distinction. Cold is background. Loss of function is the true threat. You stamp your feet lightly once or twice, not for warmth alone, but to keep circulation flowing throughout your body. Hands and feet work together this way. Movement anywhere helps everywhere. You notice that your breathing remains steady. No fog inside near the fire. Outside breath still plumes, but it no longer distracts you. Attention has narrowed to what your hands are doing. You pick up a small object that requires care, fastening, a knot. You slow down instinctively, positioning yourself closer to warmth. Fingers respond better now. Precision returns. You finish the task cleanly, then step back satisfied. The relief you feel is not dramatic. It is subtle but important. Losing dexterity feels dangerous. Regaining it feels stabilizing. Winter mornings pivot on these small successes. Someone nearby comments quietly about cold hands not complaining, just noting. The statement receives nods of recognition. No advice needed. Everyone knows the remedies. You warm your hands again briefly, then turn away, trusting that circulation will hold for a while. This trust grows with experience. Panic wastes energy. Calm adjustment preserves it. The house remains active, but quieter now. Morning has moved past its most demanding phase. Hands still work, but at a more measured pace. Urgency has faded into routine. You glance at the window. Sunlight has shifted again. Shadows shortened slightly. That change promises nothing about the temperature, but it signals progression. The day continues. You flex your fingers one last time, pleased with how easily they move now. The earlier stiffness feels distant. Not gone forever, but managed. Winter teaches respect for small failures. Ignoring numb hands leads to dropped tools, mistakes, injury. Attending to them early keeps the day intact. You've learned this lesson well. As you move into the next stretch of work, hands steady and responsive, you carry forward a quiet awareness. Not fear of the cold, but respect for its persistence. And with that awareness settled into your muscles and joints, you continue on knowing that winter mornings are survived not through strength alone, but through constant gentle attention to the smallest signals the body offers. Smell becomes the quiet narrator of the morning now. You notice it shifting as tasks overlap and spaces warm unevenly. Smoke still anchors everything, but it no longer dominates. It blends. Wool releases its lanolin scent as it heats. Damp leather gives off something sharp and earthy. Grain from earlier meals lingers faintly warmed again as air circulates. You breathe it in without comment. This mixture feels normal. It tells you where the morning has been and where it is going. Long before anyone kept written records of daily life, these smells carried memory. They still do. You move through the room and recognize each zone by scent alone. Near the hearth, smoke and heat. Near the table, food and wood. Near the door, cold air clinging stubbornly to coats and boots. The house speaks this way constantly, even when no one is talking. People living in this period would have recognized these smells as information rather than background. A change meant something. Too much smoke meant poor draft. Sourness meant dampness. Sweetness from wood meant the fire was healthy. You register these cues automatically now, even if you do not consciously name them. You pause near a hanging coat and catch the scent of the outdoors trapped in its fibres. Cold has a smell. Hell too. Clean. Thin. Almost metallic. It fades quickly indoors, but it leaves an impression. You associate it with effort, with exposure, with return. A small, almost humorous habit appears as someone lifts a boot to check it, sniffing briefly before setting it closer to the fire. Wet leather announces itself clearly. Drying now prevents misery later. You smile faintly at the practicality of it. Winter teaches you to trust your senses fully. You step back towards the hearth and notice how even the fire smells different now than it did earlier. The sharper bite of kindling has softened. The flame is feeding on thicker wood. The scent deepens, steadier and warmer. This tells you how long it will last without attention. There is no single source that explains these sensory skills clearly. They appear instead in scattered letters and offhand remarks, hints that people knew more than they wrote down. Watching yourself respond to scent alone, now you understand how that knowledge lived in the body rather than on the page. Children pass by again, brushing against you as they move. Their clothes carry a stronger mix of everything. Smoke, hay, outside air, a trace of food. They wrinkle their noses briefly, then forget about it entirely. This is the smell of morning. It does not need analysis. You notice how the air feels heavier now, slightly humid from water heating near the fire. Steam does not show. It settles, quietly easing dryness in your throat and nose. Breathing feels softer. The change is subtle but welcome. Some observers, looking back later, would assume these houses smelled unpleasant by modern standards. That assumption misses context. These were working smells. They signalled function, not neglect. Standing here now, you find them grounding rather than offensive. You adjust something small near the hearth and catch the scent of ash rising briefly. Dry and bitter, it fades quickly as the fire consumes it. That moment tells you the hearth needs a minor cleaning later. Not urgent, just noted. You pass near the door again and feel a thin ribbon of cold air slide along the floor. The smell changes instantly there. Cleaner, sharper, winter trying again. You shut the door, more firmly sealing the boundary. Someone nearby comments quietly that the house smells right this morning. Not good, not bad, just right. You know exactly what they mean. Everything is balanced. Smell carries emotion here more than words do. Comfort smells like smoke and wool. Safety smells like dry wood and steam. Readiness smells like leather warming and grain waiting to be used. You pick up a tool that still carries the scent of outdoors. Frozen wood, iron, frost. It will warm in your hands soon enough, absorbing heat and changing character. Everything shifts with temperature here, even in smell. There is an unresolved question that lingers in modern discussions about how people experience these sensory environments. Did they fade into the background or did they remain vivid? Standing here now, you suspect both. On hard days they pressed close. On routine ones they softened into familiarity. You step back and take a slow breath, letting all of it settle together. Smoke, steam, wool, earth, cold warmth. The morning smells like continuity. As you move toward the next task, you carry these cues with you unconsciously. They guide your decisions more reliably than any instruction could. Winter mornings reward those who pay attention without overthinking. And with that awareness drifting quietly alongside you, the day continues layered. Not just with work and cold, but with the subtle, persistent language of scent marking every step forward. You notice how tasks fall along invisible lines. Not lines you chose, but ones that seem to have existed long before this morning began. Some work draws you outdoors, other work keeps you near the hearth, and some work settles naturally into the hands of certain people, not because of preference, but because that is how the household has learned to function. You see it play out quietly. Someone moves toward heavier labour without being asked. Another stays inside managing smaller but constant needs. No discussion, no announcement. The morning assigns roles as efficiently as the cold assigns urgency. In many households of this time, work divided itself along expectations shaped by age, strength, skill and custom. These divisions were rarely written down, but they were deeply understood. You feel that understanding now as you step into your place without hesitation. You take on a task that matches your capacity not just physically but rhythmically. Winter work demands consistency more than bursts of effort. You settle into it aware of others moving around you in complementary ways. Nearby with you, someone handles food preparation or mending fingers, moving carefully into the warmest part of the room. That work may look lighter from a distance, but it carries its own precision and endurance. Cold stiffens fine movements faster than heavy ones. Position matters. There is a quiet exchange of glances as tasks overlap. Not permission, just acknowledgement. If one person slows, another adjusts. The system corrects itself without discussion. Winter encourages this kind of responsiveness. Some later interpretations have struggled with these divisions, trying to label them rigid or unfair. Standing here now, you sense something more fluid. Roles exist, yes, but they bend with circumstance. Illness, injury, weather, or shortage reshapes them immediately. Survival overrides ideology. A small, almost unremarkable habit surfaces as someone hands off a task mid-motion. No explanation is given. The exchange is smooth. Work continues uninterrupted. This efficiency has been practiced over countless mornings. Children drift into lighter tasks naturally, carrying small items, holding doors, gathering kindling. These contributions are not symbolic, they matter. They teach timing and responsibility without overwhelming. You notice how instruction happens here. Rarely verbal, more often through demonstration. A movement repeated slowly. A tool placed deliberately in a certain way. Correction comes gently if at all. Winter does not leave room for prolonged teaching. Learning happens alongside doing. There is a lingering uncertainty among modern readers about how people felt about these roles, whether they resented them or accepted them. The past does not answer clearly, but in this moment watching work flow without friction, you sense that usefulness itself provided a form of satisfaction. You take a brief pause to warm your hands again, then return to your task. Someone else takes your place near the hearth without comment. Rotation continues, warmth like labia circulates. The house feels steady now, almost humming beneath the surface. Everyone is engaged. No one is idle. Even moments of stillness serve a purpose. Resting hands, planning the next step, listening for cues. You hear a soft tear in fabric nearby, followed by a quiet sigh and immediate repair. Needle and thread appear quickly. Winter teaches maintenance at the moment of failure, not later. Delay only magnifies problems. A curious detail you notice is how little anyone explains what they are doing. There is trust here. Everyone understands the goal. The method matters less than the outcome. You step outside briefly again, exchanging roles with someone who's been indoors too long. This swapping happens fluidly, keeping bodies warm and alert. Cold and heat are shared resources managed collectively. There is no single source that maps these divisions neatly. They appear instead in fragments of journals and in the wear patterns of surviving tools. Standing inside this morning, you understand how much lived knowledge never made it into words. You return inside task complete and take up another without pause. The day advances through these transitions seamlessly. One role dissolves into the next. Some observers have suggested that winter magnified social order by limiting options. Others have argued it revealed adaptability. Watching these shifts now, you lean toward adaptability. Order exists, but it is flexible, responsive, alive. You glance around the room and notice how everyone seems exactly where they need to be, even if that place changes from hour to hour. There is comfort in that alignment. The fire remains steady, water is available, wood is stacked, food waits, animals are calm. These outcomes matter more than who performed which task. You take a slow breath, feeling warmth hold. The cold still presses from outside, but inside cooperation has built a buffer stronger than any wall. As the morning continues, these roles will shift again. Someone will head farther out, someone will remain behind, someone will rest briefly. None of it will be announced. For now you remain in motion, part of a system shaped by winter necessity and quiet understanding. And as you move into the next stretch of the day, you do so knowing that survival here is not individual. It is collective, practiced every morning without fanfare. Children do not wait to be told how cold feels. They learn it through skin and breath and the way their fingers hesitate before touching anything metal. You watch them now, moving with a mix of confidence and caution that feels practiced beyond their years. A child steps toward the door, then stops looking back as if checking an invisible boundary. Someone nods. That is permission enough. Boots are pulled on with effort. Leather resists small hands more than large ones. A strap twists. A knot needs help. Assistance arrives briefly, then withdraws. Independence is encouraged, but not at the cost of efficiency. You notice how children approach the cold differently than adults. They test it in small doses. A quick step outside. A hand held in the air to watch breath fog. A stomp on frost to hear it answer back. Curiosity coexists with restraint. In many households, children were expected to adapt to winter conditions early, not through instruction, but exposure. This was not harshness. It was preparation. You see it now in the way they move deliberately, not rushing, not complaining, simply adjusting. A child is given a small task, light enough to manage but real enough to matter. Carrying kindling, fetching a tool, holding a door. These contributions are small, but they anchor a sense of belonging. Winter mornings reward usefulness no matter the size. You notice how quickly children learn the warm spots in the house. The exact place where heat pools near the hearth, the corner where drafts creep along the floor. They navigate these zones, instinctively drifting closer to warmth when idle, stepping away when needed. There is still uncertainty among historians about how children perceive these routines emotionally. Did they feel burdened or secure? The record does not speak clearly. Watching them now, you sense that predictability itself offered comfort. The morning unfolds the same way day after day, and that constancy matters. A child laughs briefly when cold air slips under a coat. The sound is sharp, then gone. Laughter here is not indulgent. It is momentary, a release rather than a distraction. It keeps it that way. You see a child rub their hands together, copying adults without realizing it. The motion is learned through observation long before it is understood. Winter teaches through imitation. Words follow later, if at all. Someone hands a child a wool cap and adjusts it carefully, covering ears fully. That small act changes everything. The child relaxes visibly, shoulders dropping, movement smoothing out. Heat loss matters more than style here. A detail that feels almost tender appears when a child is turned gently towards the fire, warmed on one side then the other. This rotation is efficient, but it also feels like care made visible. Warmth is shared even with the smallest bodies. Children drift in and out of tasks, never staying idle long enough for cold to reclaim them. They move when they need to, sit briefly when warmth allows. Their pacing mirrors the house itself. You notice how they respond to sound, a door opening, wind brushing the wall, fire cracking suddenly. Each sound prompts attention, but not for fear. Winter trains alertness early. There is no sense of explanation here. No one narrates what winter is or why it matters. Children understand through experience. Cold hands teach faster than lectures ever could. You help guide a child's hands into gloves, fingers aligning carefully. The gloves are oversized, inherited, patched. They will grow into them eventually, for now function outweighs fit. The child flexes their fingers, testing movement. Satisfied, they step away, ready for whatever comes next. That small moment of readiness feels important. Winter builds capability piece by piece. Some modern readers imagine childhood in this era as grim or joyless. Standing here now, you feel something more balanced. Hard, yes, demanding it was, but also structured, purposeful and shared. Children learn quickly that cold is not an emergency, it is a condition. Panic wastes warmth. Calm preserves it. These lessons settle into the body long before the mind names them. You watch a child step outside, briefly then retreat, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. They shake snow from their boots carefully before re-entering, copying what they have seen adults do. Maintenance becomes habit early. Inside warmth wraps around them again. They return to movement without comment. The transition feels smooth. This ease has been practiced. You realize how early winter discipline forms, not as punishment but as rhythm. Wake, warm, Work, adjust, repeat. And children absorb this rhythm naturally, becoming part of it without resistance. Someone asks a child to sit briefly and warm hands before continuing. The instruction is gentle, not corrective. Cold is managed, not scolded. As the morning continues, children settle into their roles, comfortably contributing where they can, resting when needed, learning constantly without formal teaching. You glance around the room and feel a quiet reassurance. Winter is being passed down here, not as fear but as knowledge. Each small action teaches resilience more effectively than words ever could, and as the children move confidently through this cold-shaped morning, you sense how these lessons will carry forward. Long after this winter passes, the body will remember how to meet cold calmly, how to adjust, how to belong to the rhythm of the day. The morning continues steady and purposeful, shaped by many hands, young and old, all learning and reinforcing the same quiet truths together. Humour arrives quietly in winter, slipping in through small cracks rather than announcing itself. You notice it first in a raised eyebrow, a brief glance shared, when something stubborn refuses to cooperate. Laughter here is short-lived and efficient like everything else. It warms, then moves on. Someone wrestles with a frozen latch and mutters something under their breath. It does not rise to complaint. It is more like acknowledgement, a shared understanding that winter enjoys resistance for its own sake. When the latch finally gives, there is a quick smile, then the moment is gone. You feel it in yourself too. A boot that refuses to settle correctly. A glove that slips off at the worst moment. These small irritations invite either frustration or amusement. You choose the second mostly because the first wastes energy. Winter teaches you that choice early. A quiet joke passes between two people near the hearth, delivered low and dry. It is not meant to travel far, just far enough to be heard by the intended listener. The response is a soft breath of laughter, quickly contained. Sound carries, so does cold. Humour here is practical. It does not interrupt work, it punctuates it. A brief release, then back to motion. Winter allows very little excess, but it makes room for this. You notice how often these moments revolve around the cold itself. The way breath fogs unexpectedly. The way fingers fumble at the wrong time. The way snow finds its way inside boots no matter how careful you are. Joking about these things does not remove them, but it makes them easier to carry. There are hints in personal letters from this era that wit was valued precisely because conditions were hard. People commented on stubborn winters with irony rather than despair. Standing here now, you understand how that tone developed naturally. When hardship is constant, exaggeration loses its power. Dry humour remains. You share a glance with someone when a log pops loudly in the fire, startling a child. The child recovers quickly, embarrassed for a moment, then laughs at themselves. That laughter changes the energy of the room. Tension dissolves. Warmth spreads in a way fire alone cannot manage. You pick up a tool and find it colder than expected. You switch hands instinctively, then smile at the predictability of it. Of course it is cold, of course it always will be. The surprise lies only in forgetting. A small ritual appears as someone exaggerates a shiver briefly, just enough to invite a response. Another person shakes their head in mock seriousness. The exchange lasts seconds. It says everything without saying much at all. There is still disagreement among later observers about whether people of this period expressed emotion freely or kept it tightly controlled. Moments like this suggest something in between. Emotion exists, but it is shaped by context. Winter allows expression that does not demand attention. You notice how humour clusters around transition points, coming in from outside, beginning a new task, pausing briefly near the hearth. These are moments when bodies adjust and minds catch up. A joke fits neatly there, easing the shift. You laugh softly when someone remarks on how long the morning seems, even though everyone knows the day has barely begun. The comment is not serious. It is an acknowledgement of how winter stretches perception. Time feels heavier when cold presses in. There is a kind of shared relief in naming that feeling even lightly. It tells everyone that the sensation is common, not personal. Winter is not targeting you. It is simply being winter. You step outside briefly again and return with a bit of snow clinging stubbornly to your coat. Inside it, melts immediately, leaving a damp patch. Someone points it out with a raised eyebrow. You brush it away and shrug. The moment passes, but the smile lingers. Humour here rarely involves trees. It lives in gestures and timing. A pause held just long enough, a look that says yes, this again. These cues travel faster than words and cost less breath. You find yourself smiling at a child who has discovered that breath fogs more dramatically if they exaggerate an exhale. The child tests it once, then again, delighted briefly. An adult catches the look and shakes their head, gently amused rather than annoyed. The child moves on, curiosity satisfied. This lightness does not undermine seriousness. Work continues uninterrupted. Tasks remain precise. Humour coexists with responsibility rather than competing with it. Winter demands that balance. Some modern interpretations assume that hardship squeezes joy out of daily life. Moments like this challenge that idea. Joy here is quieter, smaller, but no less real. It fits into the margins winter leaves open. You notice how these moments of levity tend to fade quickly as well. No one clings to them. They serve their purpose and then release. Lingering would invite cold back in. You adjust a stack of wood and catch yourself smiling again when a piece rolls slightly before settling. Wood has its own opinion in winter. Accepting that feels easier than fighting it. A shared comment about the cold reaching ears despite a cap earns a brief nod from several people at once. Agreement feels good even when it changes nothing. It confirms experience. You rub your hands together once more and feel warmth hold. That small success invites another smile. The body answers when you treat it kindly. Humour fades naturally as attention shifts back to work. No one announces the change. It simply happens. The room returns to its steady rhythm. You realise that these brief moments of lightness are not distractions at all. They are tools. They smooth the edges winter sharpens. They remind you that endurance does not have to be joyless. As the morning continues, you remain alert for these moments, not seeking them out, but welcoming them when they appear. They arrive on their own terms, just like everything else in winter. And as you move into the next phase of the day, muscles, warm hands, steady, breath, even you carry with you the quiet knowledge that winter mornings are served not just through effort, but through these small shared acknowledgements that say without words, we are all still here. There is a quiet moment that arrives once the morning has proven it will hold together. You feel it now slipping in between tasks without asking for attention. The fire is steady, work is underway. No one is rushing to correct anything. That pause has a texture all its own. You notice it as you stand still briefly, hands resting at your sides, breath moving easily. The house hums rather than clatters. Even the cold outside feels less aggressive, not because it has weakened, but because you have adjusted to it. For many people living through winters like this, habit served the same purpose prayer once did. Repetition grounded the day. Doing things in the same order, the same way, built a sense of control in a world that offered very little certainty. You sense that structure now, not as belief but as steadiness. Someone murmurs a few familiar words before stepping back outside. Not loudly, not ceremonially, just enough to be heard by those nearby. Others nod, not pausing their work. These moments are not interruptions, they are anchors. You find yourself repeating a small action the same way you always do. Adjusting a tool before setting it down, turning slightly toward the fire when stopping, checking the latch twice before moving on. These gestures carry meaning through repetition rather than explanation. There is a question that lingers in later reflections about whether faith or routine mattered more in daily survival. The answer never quite settles. Standing here now, you feel how easily the two overlap. Routine becomes belief when it works often enough. You take a moment near the hearth, not to warm fully, but to center yourself. Heat touches your palms. You breathe slowly. There is no urgency pulling at you now. The morning has shifted from reaction to maintenance. Outside, a distant sound drifts in, then fades. You do not investigate. Some things can be left alone. Winter teaches discernment. Not every noise demands a response. You notice how the house holds warmth more evenly now. Corners that felt sharp earlier have softened. Walls have absorbed heat. Air feels thicker, kinder. This change took time, not effort. Patience did the work. A small habit surfaces as someone straightens an object that does not strictly need it. A chair nudged back into place. A cloth folded again. These acts feel unnecessary at first glance, but they create order. Order creates calm. Calm preserves energy. You realize how rarely anyone sits fully still for long. Rest exists here in fragments. Leaning, standing quietly, warming hands. These pauses are enough. Anything more risks cooling too much. Some later interpretations suggest that people relied on belief to endure hardship. Moments like this suggest something simpler. They relied on rhythm, on knowing what came next, on trusting the sequence. You take another breath and feel how easily it moves now. No fog near the fire, no tightness in your chest. Your body has settled into the temperature rather than fighting it. A child passes you carrying something small and purposeful. They move with confidence now, no hesitation. Earlier the cold dictated every step. Now it has receded into the background. This is what adjustment looks like. You step outside briefly once more, not to work, just to feel the contrast. Cold meets you immediately, but it does not shock. You stand there calmly, then return inside without hurry. The transition feels smooth. Back near the hearth, you rub your hands together once and stop. They are warm enough, that is all you need. Excess heat would only slow you later. Someone nearby speaks quietly about the day ahead, not planning in detail, just acknowledging it exists. Tomorrow will come, tonight will come. This morning sits exactly where it should. There is no sense of a triumph here, just continuation. The morning has been met successfully, and that success feels ordinary rather than remarkable. You pick up a tool again and feel how natural it is in your hands now. Earlier, cold made everything feel foreign. Now familiarity has returned. Winter loses some of its power once routine settles in. You glance at the light near the window. It has shifted again, not dramatically, but enough to notice. Time continues its slow movement, unmarked by alarms or schedules. Some people later describe these moments as quiet grace. Others call them habit. Labels matter less than experience. What you feel now is steadiness, and it is enough. You move back into your work without thinking about it. The pause dissolves naturally. Nothing announces its end. It simply gives way to motion. And as you continue through the morning, grounded by repetition and small acts done the same way each day, you understand how people endured winters like this, not by bracing constantly, but by settling into patterns that carried them forward one calm breath at a time. At some point, comparison sneaks in. Not loudly, not as complaint, just as a passing thought that drifts through while your hands are busy. You imagine briefly how this morning might feel if warmth arrived at the turn of a knob, if light appeared at the press of a switch. The thought does not linger, it cannot. There is too much to do. You notice how quickly your mind returns to the present. Cold has a way of anchoring attention. There is no room here for extended abstraction. The body insists on relevance, warmth, movement, sequence. Everything else fades. Later generations would come to think of mornings as something to be optimized. Faster, easier, more comfortable. Standing here now, you feel how different the goal once was. Mornings were not meant to be conquered. They were meant to be entered carefully. You reach for a familiar object and feel how natural it is now in your hand. Earlier the cold made everything feel distant. Now the distance has closed. Muscle memory has taken over. You work without thinking about how your fingers move. You catch yourself smiling faintly at the contrast, not smugly, just with a quiet awareness that this way of beginning the day demands something different from you. It asks for patience rather than speed, attention rather than convenience. There is a lingering question that often appears in modern discussions about past hardship. Did people feel deprived, or did they simply not imagine alternatives? Standing here now, you suspect the second answer explains more than the first. What you do not expect, you do not miss in the same way. You step outside briefly again, drawn by habit rather than necessity. The cold greets you like an old acquaintance. You nod internally and move on. There is no negotiation left. You know the terms now. You return inside and notice how the house feels almost generous by comparison. Warmth is relative. So is comfort. The fire has not grown hotter, but your perception has shifted. That shift feels important. Someone nearby mentioned something about a later task, perhaps one that will wait until afternoon when light softens and hands stay warmer longer. The plan is casual, flexible. Time here is not something to outrun. It is something to move with. You recall briefly mornings from another life. Soft light, quiet warmth, ease. The memory floats up and then drifts away. It does not compete with the present. It simply exists alongside it like a comparison without judgment. There is still debate among those who study these periods about whether people understood their lives as difficult. The word itself is slippery. Difficulty implies an alternative. What you feel here is effort, not misery. Effort feels normal. You warm your hands once more out of habit than need, then stop. Too much heat dulls alertness. Balance matters. You step back into motion. A child nearby struggles briefly with something small and stubborn, then solves it with patience rather than force. You notice the parallel and feel a quiet approval. This environment teaches that lesson repeatedly. You glance again at the light near the window. It has shifted farther along the floor. Morning is well established now. The earliest edge of hardship has passed. Some later observers romanticize scenes like this softening edges and skipping discomfort. Others focused only on hardship. Standing here now, you feel how incomplete both views are. The truth lives in the middle, demanding yes, but also grounded, purposeful, real. You adjust your clothing slightly, not because you are cold, but because things settle differently once the body warms fully. Fabric relaxes, seams ease. Even garments change character as the morning advances. You step into another task without thinking. There is no mental hurdle now. The day flows. You move with it. The comparison you felt earlier fades completely. There is no need to measure this morning against any other. It stands on its own terms. You realize that this is the moment when modern impatience would struggle most. When nothing feels urgent, yet nothing is finished. Winter mornings teach endurance of this in-between state. You breathe steadily, aware of your body, aware of the space around you, aware of others moving in quiet coordination. The house holds, the fire holds, you hold, and as the day continues to unfold without hurry, you understand something subtle. Comfort does not always come from ease. Sometimes it comes from knowing exactly where you are, what is required, and that you're capable of meeting it. Something shifts in you without ceremony. You notice it not as warmth exactly, but as acceptance. The cold has not gone anywhere. It presses against the walls, waits beyond the door, seeps through seams when it finds them, and yet it no longer feels like the central problem of the morning. It has become part of the background, like the weight of clothing on your shoulders or the sound of the fire breathing behind you. Your body has adjusted. That is the simplest explanation. Muscles move without protest now. Joints bend smoothly. Breath comes evenly, no longer sharp at the edges. You still feel the temperature, but it does not demand constant attention. This is what settling in feels like. You notice a wet when you step outside again for a short task. The cold meets you familiar and firm, but it does not steal your breath. You move immediately, not bracing, not hesitating. Your feet find their path. Your hands know how long they can remain exfused. Awareness replaces reaction. Inside the house holds warmth in a way it did not earlier. The walls have absorbed it. The floor no longer bites at your feet. Even the air seems thicker, as if it remembers heat now and is reluctant to let it go. This change did not happen suddenly. It built slowly, minute by minute, while you were busy with other things. You pause near the hearth and feel no urgency to press closer. That alone tells you something. Earlier you chased warmth instinctively. Now you trust it to be there. Trust changes posture. You stand more upright, shoulders relax, hands rest easily at your sides. This adjustment happens quietly without announcement. No one points it out. No one celebrates it. The morning simply reaches a point where survival effort gives way to endurance. The difference matters. You pick up a tool and notice how natural it feels. Earlier the cold made everything feel unfamiliar, as if you were borrowing your own hands. Now grip and movement align again. Muscle memory has returned fully. Work flows without conscious planning. You glance toward the window. Light has shifted again, softer now, spreading rather than slicing. The sun has climbed, though it offers little warmth. Still, its presence matters. It marks progress. It reassures. Outside sounds are fewer. The early burst of activity has passed. Neighbours are deeper into their tasks or have retreated indoors. The settlement feels steadier, less reactive. Winter mornings always begin loudly, then quiet down as balance is found. You take a moment to stand still and notice your body. Not checking for discomfort, just observing. Fingers are warm enough, toes respond easily. Your breath no longer fogs inside. This is as comfortable as winter allows, and you recognize it as something to appreciate. There is a habit you notice in yourself now. You move before you cool too much. You rest before fatigue sets in. You adjust clothing before discomfort grows. These choices happen without thought. The morning has taught you how to pace yourself. You remember how sharp everything felt when you first stood up. The shock of the floor, the sting of air, the hesitation before leaving the bed. That version of the morning feels distant now, not because it was long ago, but because you have passed through it successfully. Someone nearby comments on how settled things feel. The words are simple, not relief, not pride, just observation. You nod in agreement. Everyone senses it. You take another small task and complete it easily. There is no rush, no resistance. Movement feels cooperative now. The day has found its working temperature. There is an idea that sometimes appears in reflections on life before modern convenience, that people were always uncomfortable, always struggling. Moments like this complicate that picture. The struggle existed, yes, but it was not constant. The body adapted. The environment responded. Equilibrium was possible even if it was temporary. You notice how little attention the cold demands now. It is still there, still shaping decisions, but it no longer dominates thought. That mental space opens room for other awareness. Planning, listening, small observations that were impossible earlier when all focus went towards staying warm. You hear the fire shift behind you and know without looking that it will need attention soon but not immediately. That knowledge rests easily in your mind. You will get to it. There is time. You step outside again briefly, not for work, but to feel the contrast once more. Cold wraps around you, clean and direct. You stand for a moment, then return inside. The transition feels smooth, almost gentle. That is new. Back near the hearth, you remove gloves and set them aside. They are dry now, warm enough to use again when needed. You flex your fingers once and smile faintly. Small victories matter. The house feels like it belongs to the day now. Earlier it felt like a shelter against night. Now it is a workspace, a place of movement and continuity. The morning has crossed a threshold that cannot be marked on a clock. You notice how people move differently too. Less hovering, less checking, more confidence. Tasks are picked up and set down fluidly. No one is waiting for permission or instruction. The rhythm carries everyone forward. This is the part of the morning that modern life rarely prepares you for. The part where nothing dramatic happens, yet everything works. Where effort gives way to steadiness. Where discomfort fades, not because it is removed, but because it has been absorbed into routine. You breathe slowly and feel how natural it is now. No sting, no tightness. Just air moving in and out, supporting what you're doing rather than distracting from it. The cold is not lost. It still defines the limits of the day, but it has stopped fighting you, or perhaps you have stopped fighting it. The difference is subtle but important. You glance once more at the window, then away. You do not need to keep checking now. The morning is stable. The day will continue along the path already set. You take up another task, hand steady. Body warm enough, mind clear. The sense of being under siege has faded. In its place sits something quieter and more sustainable. This is how winter mornings truly work, not as a single moment of hardship, but as a gradual negotiation that ends if done well in balance. And as you move through this settled stretch of the day, you carry with you the knowledge that you have already passed the hardest part. Everything from here on builds on what you have already managed. The cold remains patient as ever, but you have found your place within it. The morning no longer asks questions, it moves forward on its own, confident in the groundwork already laid. You feel this in the way tasks present themselves without urgency, almost politely waiting their turn. Nothing is pressing, nothing is missing. Winter still frames every decision, but it no longer crowds your thoughts. You step into another small piece of work, something that would have felt irritating earlier when your body was still waking to the cold. Now it feels almost welcome. Movement keeps warmth circulating, purpose keeps attention steady. The task does not matter much on its own. What matters is that it fits. You notice how easily you shift between inside and outside now. Doors open and close without hesitation. Gloves go on and off smoothly. The cold greets you and releases you without drama. Your body knows the timing. How long exposure can last. When to move, when to retreat. This ease did not arrive by accident. Houses like this were shaped around the expectation that mornings would feel harsh at first and workable later. Thick walls, small windows, central hearths. Everything anticipates this gradual easing. You're not fighting the structure, you are moving with it. You take a moment to tidy something small, a pile of tools aligned, a bench cleared. These acts are not about cleanliness, they are about preserving the rhythm you have found. Disorder invites friction. Friction invites cold back in. Outside, the light has settled into its midday character. Still bright, still cold, but no longer tentative. Shadows shorten slightly. Surfaces lose their early morning sharpness. This change does not mean warmth is coming. It means predictability has arrived. You catch yourself planning the rest of the day without effort. Which tasks can wait? Which must be finished before evening? Where to place energy? Planning now feels natural. Earlier it would have felt overwhelming. Timing matters. There is an unresolved notion that appears often in reflections on early life, whether people endured their days or inhabited them. Standing here now, you feel the difference clearly. Endurance belonged to the first hours. Inhabiting comes later once balance is found. You notice how little anyone speaks about the cold now. Earlier it was named frequently, even if only in passing. Now it has receded from conversation. Silence around it does not mean it is gone. It means it has been accounted for. You pause briefly near the hearth, not to warm fully, just to stand within its range. Heat brushes your hands lightly. You do not linger. You have learned how long is enough. A child passes by, moving confidently, no longer drawn toward the fire instinctively. Their body has settled too. They carry something small and important, moving carefully but without hesitation. This shift feels significant. Winter has stopped demanding constant reassurance. You step outside again and stand still for a moment, letting the cold settle against you. It feels almost neutral now. Still comfortable if you linger too long, but no longer hostile. You take a breath and let it out slowly. The air feels crisp but manageable. You return inside and close the door gently. The sound of it settling into place feels final in a way. Not an ending, but a boundary reinforced. Some later interpretations suggest that life in these conditions was dominated by constant vigilance. Moments like this suggest something quieter. Vigilance gives way to trust once routines prove reliable. You trust the fire. You trust your clothing. You trust your own judgment now. You move through another task and finish it without noticing when you started. Time has loosened its grip again. This is the state where work feels least burdensome, not because it is easy, but because it is aligned. You glance at the window and realize you have not checked it in a while. That awareness surprises you. Earlier the sky demanded attention. Now it does not. The day has stabilized enough to release your gaze. You hear a sound from outside that would have startled you earlier. A branch snapping, a tool striking. You register it and move on. Your nervous system has settled. Winter no longer triggers constant alertness. You take a moment to stretch arms overhead, then let them fall naturally. Your body feels warm all the way through. Not heated, not flush, just comfortably active. This is the point winter mornings aim for, even if they never name it. There is a sense of quiet competence in the house now. Everyone knows what they're doing. No one is waiting for instruction. Tasks are completed, then replaced by the next without friction. You notice how the air feels now, not just warm but lived in. It carries the imprint of everything that has already happened. Smoke softened, steam dispersed, movement settled. The house feels awake in a deeper way. You pause again, leaning briefly against a wall, and realize that fatigue has not set in yet. Early effort warmed you without draining you. That balance matters. Winter punishes overexertion as harshly as inaction. You take one last look around the room, not because you need to check anything, but because it feels good to notice that everything is holding. Fire, water, tools, people, order exists, and it is enough. Outside, the cold continues its quiet watch. Inside, life continues just as quietly. Neither overwhelms the other. This stretch of the morning does not announce itself. It does not feel special. That is precisely why it matters. It is the reward for moving carefully through the harder hours. You realize that if someone asked you later what this morning felt like, you might struggle to explain it. Not because it lacked meaning, but because its meaning lived in small adjustments rather than events. You take a breath and feel how natural it is. You move into the next task without hesitation. The day has momentum now and you are part of it. Winter has not been conquered. It never is. But it has been met, understood, and integrated into the rhythm of the day. And as you continue forward steady and unhurried, you carry with you the quiet certainty that this is how mornings like this were meant to unfold. Not in drama or suffering, but in gradual balance built piece by piece, until the cold becomes simply another fact of the world, no longer the story itself. The morning begins to loosen its grip, not by ending, but by softening. You notice it first in the way your body no longer braces before each movement. Shoulders stay low, jaw unclenches, breathing settles into a deeper, slower rhythm that no longer needs attention. The cold is still present. It always will be, but it has shifted roles. Earlier it was the lead voice directing every decision. Now it has stepped back, content to remain part of the background. You feel that change as a kind of quiet relief, not dramatic, just steady. You complete one last small task without thinking about where it fits in the morning. It fits because everything fits now. Fire burns at the right pace. Water stands ready. Tools rest where they belong. The house feels fully awake. You stand near the hearth, again, not to warm yourself, but because it feels like the right place to pause. Heat brushes your hands gently. You let it then step back. Warmth has become something you carry, not something you chase. Light moves again across the floor, slower now, less urgent. The sharp contrast of early morning has softened into something calmer. The day has found its tone. You realize how quiet your thoughts have become. Not empty, just unhurried. Winter mornings have a way of stripping away unnecessary noise. What remains feels simple and manageable. Someone nearby sits for a moment, not from exhaustion, but from completion. You mirror the motion, resting briefly without sinking too deeply. Sitting is comfortable now, not risky. The floor no longer steals heat aggressively. The air feels kind. There is a sense of continuity here that stretches beyond this single morning. You can imagine yesterday unfolding much the same way. Tomorrow likely will too. That repetition feels reassuring rather than dull. You take one more slow breath and feel it move easily. No sting, no fog, just air doing what it is meant to do. Outside the cold waits patiently. Inside life continues just as patiently. Neither rushes the other. You think briefly of the night that came before this morning. The stillness. The cold pressing close. The careful sleep. That phase has passed successfully. Morning did its work. And now, without any clear signal, you feel ready to let the day carry you forward. Wind down. The pace eases further now, as if the morning itself senses it has done enough. You allow your movements to slow just a little. The sentences in your mind stretch out, becoming softer, less defined at the edges. You imagine the house holding its warmth steadily, no longer fighting the cold, simply existing alongside it. The fire breathes quietly, the walls remember heat, the air feels settled, almost heavy in a comforting way. Your body feels supported, muscles are warm but relaxed, hands rest easily. Breathing is deep and unforced. There's nothing you need to prepare for right now, nothing pressing at you from the next moment. Outside winter continues its slow watch, but it no longer feels personal. Inside there is a sense of being held by routine, by structure, by the quiet success of having moved through the hardest part of the morning. You let your thoughts drift gently, no longer following tasks or plans. Just sensations, warmth, stillness, a faint crackle of fire somewhere behind you. If you close your eyes now, everything feels stable. The day knows where it is going. You do not need to guide it. So you settle into that feeling, letting the morning fade into something softer, something safe. And as the quiet deepens, you rest there comfortably, knowing this rhythm has carried people through countless winters before and it will carry you just as gently now. Sweet dreams.